What if a king, once feared across kingdoms, was reduced to a helpless prisoner beneath a cursed citadel? And what horrors must he unleash to rise again and reclaim his throne? Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight's story is The Scarlet Citadel by Robert E. Howard, a classic story reimagined and retold for the modern age. The battlefield had gone quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after something terrible has already happened. Moments ago, the air had been alive with steel, screams, and thunder. Now, victory cries drifted across the plain, tangled with the last fading gasps of the dying. Bodies lay everywhere, scattered like torn leaves after a violent storm. The setting sun cast a molten glow over shattered armor, dented helmets, and broken blades half buried in dark, thick pools of blood. War banners, once proud and bright, lay trampled into the mud, their silk soaked and ruined. Horses lay twisted among their fallen riders, their once glorious forms now still and stained alike in crimson. The ground was a graveyard of motionless shapes, knights, archers, spearmen, crushed together in the aftermath of chaos. Then came the horns. A deep, triumphant blast rolled across the field, echoing over the dead. The victors were closing in. Their armored ranks moved with purpose, tightening, converging, like a great gleaming wheel turning inward toward a single point. Toward one man. That day, Conan, king of Aquilonia, had watched his army be destroyed. 5,000 of his finest knights had ridden with him across the southeastern border into the open grasslands of Ophir. They had come expecting alliance, but found betrayal waiting instead. King Amalrus, once a trusted ally, stood against him, side by side with Strabonus of Koth. By the time Conan understood, it was already too late. Still, he fought, with no archers, no infantry, only steel-clad cavalry against an army 6 times their size. He drove his knights forward like a storm, lances shattered against enemy lines, armor split, formations buckled. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed possible. The enemy's center collapsed under the sheer fury of his charge, their ranks breaking, scattering before him. But it was a trap. As Conan pushed through, the untouched flanks closed in from both sides, tight, crushing, inescapable. Arrows rained down from distant lines, slipping through every weakness in his warrior's armor. Horses screamed and fell, men were thrown, only to be finished where they lay by advancing spears. The enemy regrouped again and surged forward in relentless waves. Numbers overwhelmed skill, weight crushed will. And still, the Aquilonians did not run. They stood. They fought, and they died. Not one of the 5,000 who rode with Conan would leave that field alive. Now, at the center of it all, surrounded by the broken bodies of his last loyal guards, Conan stood alone. Back pressed against a mound of the dead, men and horses alike, his sword still in hand, and the enemy closing in. They came at him in waves. Ophirian knights, their armor flashing gold in the dying light, spurred their horses over piles of the dead, leaping, landing, striking. Blades flashed downward toward the lone figure at the center. Around him closed the rest, stocky Shemites with dark braided beards, and grim Kothian warriors pressing in on foot, tightening the circle. Steel clashed, loud, relentless, deafening, and in the middle of it all, he stood, a towering shape in blackened armor. Conan did not fight like a king. He fought like something far older.
His sword rose and fell with brutal precision. No elegance, no restraint, just raw, devastating force. Each strike landed like a butcher's cleaver, tearing through shield and bone alike. Men staggered back, others didn't rise at all. Horses, riderless and wild-eyed, thundered past across the field. At Conan's feet, the bodies piled higher, broken, twisted, unrecognizable. A ring of death formed around him, growing with every heartbeat. And still, he did not fall. The attackers hesitated. Even now, panting, bloodied, furious, they recoiled from him. Then the tide shifted. Through the chaos, 3 figures advanced, calm where others faltered. The shouting quieted as they approached, their presence cutting through the noise like a blade. Strabonus came first, broad, dark-faced, his eyes sharp with calculation. Beside him rode Amalrus, lean, composed, his every movement controlled and coldly treacherous. But it was the third who drew the silence. Tsathalanti. He did not wear armor, only flowing silk robes untouched by blood or dust. His face, thin, sharp, carried the stillness of something watching from above. His black eyes gleamed, unblinking, like a predator studying its prey. Stories followed that man like shadows. In distant villages, mothers whispered his name to frighten children into silence. Slaves broke at the mere threat of being sent to him. It was said he collected forbidden knowledge bound in human skin, that beneath his palace lay pits where unspeakable bargains were made in the dark. Men feared kings. They feared Tsathalanti more. He reined in his horse and watched, and then he smiled, not with triumph, but with interest. Before them, Conan stood unmoving among the dead. His helmet dented, his armor torn and black with blood. His face, scarred, grim, burning with fury, looked less like a ruler now and more like something carved from the wild itself. Whatever polish kingship had given him was gone. What remained was the barbarian, a son of the north, a Cimmerian, and in his eyes burned something that even seasoned warriors hesitate. The 3 rulers kept their distance. Strabonus leaned forward in his saddle, his voice sharp with frustration. "Archers," he barked, "bring him down." He had lost too many men already, captains cut down like wheat before a scythe. His anger was rising, tangled with something deeper, unease. But Tsathalanti raised a hand. "Alive," he said quietly. Strabonus shot him a glare. "Alive?" he snapped. "You expect me to cage that? He's tearing through my finest warriors like they're nothing. I've spent years training them, and now they're lying in the dirt like carrion." His voice rose tight with fury. "No, we end this. Loose the arrows." Again, Tsatha shook his head. Slowly, deliberately, he dismounted. A cold laugh slipped from his lips as his feet touched the blood-soaked ground. "You still don't understand," he said, his voice low, almost amused. Then he looked up, straight at Conan. "My mind," he murmured, "is far more dangerous than any blade."
He moved forward, and the army parted. Pikemen stepped back first, their heavy armor clinking as they shifted away, careful not to brush even the edge of his robe. The towering warriors who moments ago had faced Conan without fear now avoided the slightest contact with this man in silk. Knights followed, pulling their reins, opening a path without a word. No one wanted to be near him. Tsathalanti walked through them as if the battlefield belonged to him alone. He stepped over corpses without looking down, and stopped just a few paces from Conan. The contrast was almost unreal. On one side, a towering figure in shattered black armor, sword raised high, blood dripping from its edge, radiating raw violence. On the other, a thin man in flowing silk, still, composed, untouched. The entire field fell silent, every eye locked onto that moment. "I offer you life, Conan," Tsotha said softly, though there was something cruel curling beneath his words. Conan's answer came like a growl. "I give you death." The sword came down. It was not a strike, it was a sentence, a blow meant to split the sorcerer in half, driven by fury, strength, and the last defiance of a king who refused to kneel. The watching army gasped, but Tsotha moved, too fast. One instant he stood still, the next he was inside the arc of the blade. His hand touched Conan's exposed forearm, just a brief, almost casual contact where the armor had been torn away. That was all. The sword veered off course. Conan's body shuddered, then collapsed. The impact shook the ground as the giant fell, his weapon slipping from his grasp. He did not rise again. A ripple of disbelief spread through the ranks. Tsotha stood over him and smiled. "Lift him," he said calmly. "There is nothing to fear now. The lion has lost his fangs." Slowly, cautiously, the kings approached. Conan lay rigid, unmoving, like a corpse cast in iron, but his eyes burned, wide open, blazing with rage so fierce it seemed it might ignite the very air around him. He could see, he could hear, but he could not move. Amalrus frowned, unease creeping into his voice. "What have you done to him?" Tsotha raised his hand. On his finger gleamed a strange ring, intricate, unnatural. With a slight motion, a tiny steel barb slid out from its inner edge, quick and precise, like the flick of a serpent's tongue. "A simple touch," Tsotha said, almost lazily. "The venom comes from the purple lotus, a rare bloom found deep in the haunted swamps of southern Stygia." His eyes flicked back to Conan. "It stills the body, but leaves the mind untouched." A faint pause. "As you can see." Conan's glare answered him, fury trapped behind flesh that would not obey. "Chain him," Tsotha continued. "Lay him in a chariot. We ride for Korshemish before night fully falls." Order spread quickly. Strabonus turned, already thinking ahead, his voice sharp with command as he issued new instructions: troops to march, cities to besiege, supply lines to secure. The war was not over, it had only shifted, and now Conan was no longer leading it. As darkness settled over the battlefield, the army made camp among the dead. Fires flickered under the rising stars, and far from the silence of the fallen, a long column began to move. Kings rode at the center, surrounded by their finest guards, their armor catching the firelight as they advanced toward the distant capital. Behind them rolled chariots, heavy with the wounded and the defeated. In one of them lay Conan, bound in chains, unable to move, forced to endure. The taste of defeat burned in his mouth like poison, but inside, nothing had changed. His mind was alive, racing, raging, turning over every moment of the battle, every decision, every mistake, every betrayal. And beneath it all, something darker grew. Not despair, not surrender, something far more dangerous. The fury of a king who had been broken, but not yet destroyed.
It had all begun with a lie. Amalrus had sent word, urgent, desperate, begging for help. He claimed Strabonus was tearing through his lands, that his people were breaking, that his kingdom, caught like a narrow wedge between Aquilonia and Koth, would not survive without aid. He had asked for 1,000 horsemen, and for Conan himself, to inspire what little hope remained. Conan almost laughed now if his body had obeyed him. Instead, the memory burned.
He had not come with 1,000, he had come with 5,000 of his finest riders, 5,000 men who trusted him, who followed him without question, who now lay rotting on a Fuge field because he had believed a traitor's plea. He had ridden into Ophir in good faith and ridden straight into a trap. The truth was clear now. Amalrus and Strabonus had never been enemies. They had been waiting for him. And it said more than any praise ever could that it had taken an entire army to bring him down. A red haze crept into his vision. His blood roared in his ears, pounding against his skull like war drums. Rage surged through him, violent, suffocating, endless. In all his life, Conan had never known fury like this, not because he had been defeated, but because he could do nothing. The chariot jolted over uneven ground, dragging him back into the present. Chains bit into his flesh. His body lay still, lifeless, but his mind refused to be still. It moved, faster, slipping through memories like a storm tearing through shadows. He saw himself as he had been, a wild youth in the northern hills, bare-skinned, fierce, untamed. A sellsword, hard-eyed, armored, fighting for coin beneath huge banners. A pirate, laughing on the deck of a dragon-prowed ship, leaving fire and blood in his wake along southern coasts. A commander, leading armies, steel flashing, banners rising. A king, crowned in gold, seated beneath the lion's standard, while nobles bowed and courts glittered around him. So many lives, so many battles, so many victories, and yet it always came back to this, the betrayal, the sorcery, the trap. His thoughts circled it again and again, grinding against it until the pressure felt unbearable. His temples throbbed as if they might burst. Somewhere nearby, the wounded groaned and cried out from the other chariots, but instead of pity, the sound fed something darker inside him, a savage rising satisfaction. Pain was everywhere, and he was not alone in it. The column moved through the night, relentless and steady. Stars wheeled overhead as they crossed the border of Ophir, leaving the field of slaughter. By dawn, the horizon began to change. At first, it was only a faint shimmer, pale shapes rising in the distance. Then the light grew stronger, painting the skyline in soft hues of gold and rose. Korshemish. Its slender towers pierced the morning sky, elegant and gleaming. But even from afar, something overshadowed them, something darker. High above the city, perched upon a steep and unforgiving hill, stood a structure that seemed to bleed into the sky itself, the Scarlet Citadel. From a distance, it looked like a wound, raw, vivid, unnatural against the pale horizon. Its walls rose sheer and impenetrable, its presence dominating everything below. Only a single narrow road, paved in white marble and sealed by heavy iron gates, led up to it. There was no other way in, no other way out. From its heights, one could see everything: the wide, sunlit streets of the city, the markets already stirring with life, the domes and minarets rising in quiet grandeur. Beyond them, the palaces of the king spread out in lavish gardens, lush with trees, bright with blossoms, threaded with streams and shimmering fountains, a city alive with beauty. And above it, the citadel watched, silent, waiting, like a predator poised over its prey. The gates of the outer wall groaned open as the procession approached. Steel-clad guards lined the path in perfect formation, their spears catching the early light. Trumpets rang out, sharp, triumphant, announcing the return of their king. Strabonus rode forward into his capital, crowned in victory. Behind him, the chariots rolled on, and within one of them, bound in chains, eyes burning with unbroken fury, Conan watched it all. No crowds came to celebrate, no cheers, no flowers scattered beneath the hooves of conquering kings. Strabonus had returned too quickly, faster than rumor, faster than truth. The people of the city were only just waking, stepping into the pale morning light when they saw their ruler riding in with a strangely small escort. They paused, confused, uncertain. Was this victory or something else? From the floor of the chariot, Conan forced his stiffening body to move. The paralysis was fading, slowly, painfully, but enough for him to lift his head, to look. So this was Korshemish, the queen of the south. Its beauty struck even him. White stone streets gleamed under the sun. Towers rose like spears of gold and ivory. The gates, massive, intricate, glowed as if carved from sunlight itself. Once, he had imagined entering this city very differently.
At the head of an army, armor blazing, the lion banner of Aquilonia snapping above him. A conqueror. Instead, he lay half-naked in chains, stripped of his armor, thrown like a captured beast onto the cold bronze floor of an enemy chariot. For a moment, something unexpected broke through his rage. A dark, bitter amusement. A laugh tore from his throat, low, rough, edged with something almost unhinged. The soldiers driving the chariot flinched at the sound. To them, it did not sound human. It sounded like a lion awaking. Inside the citadel, the air felt different, heavier. The chamber they brought him to seemed carved from shadow itself. A domed ceiling of black stone arched high above, swallowing the light. Strange, dark jewels glimmered faintly along the walls, catching reflections that moved like whispers. And in that chamber, they waited. Conan stood at the center. Blood from untreated wounds had dried across his body, streaking his skin. Chains hung from his wrists and ankles, heavy, but not enough to break his stance. He wore nothing but a simple loincloth, yet he looked more formidable than any armored knight. Around him stood guards, massive men, silent, their axes resting easily in their hands. Ahead, on cushioned divans, reclined the kings. Strabonus lounged in gold and silk, jewels flashing with every idle movement. Amalrus sat beside him, composed, elegant, his expression carefully controlled. Slaves moved quietly at their sides, pouring wine into cups carved from single stones of deep blue crystal. Luxury, power, control. And yet, all of it felt small. Because at the center of that room stood something they could not dress in silk or chain in iron. Conan. Bare, bloodied, chained, and still unbroken. His presence filled the chamber, raw and undeniable. It stripped away the illusion of their grandeur, reduced it to decoration, glittering, fragile, meaningless. They felt it, even if they did not speak it. Only one among them seemed untouched, Thothalanti. He stood calmly before Conan, hands folded within his sleeves, his dark eyes studying him with quiet fascination. "Our intentions are simple," Thotha said at last, his voice smooth, almost polite. "We wish to expand our empire." Conan's lips curled. "So you mean to carve up my kingdom like meat?" he growled. Amalrus leaned forward slightly, his tone measured, almost reasonable. "And what claim had you to it? You were an outsider, a wanderer. You took a crown that was never truly yours. We are prepared to offer you compensation." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Conan laughed, not softly,
not politely. It exploded from him, deep, harsh, filled with contempt. "Compensation," he echoed, the word twisting in his mouth like something foul. "A price for treachery, for betrayal." His eyes burned brighter. "I am a barbarian, yes," his voice low but carrying through the chamber. "But even I would not sell my kingdom, my people, for my life and a handful of your gold." His gaze shifted between them, sharp, cutting. "You speak of claims," he went on. "Tell me, how did you earn your crowns?" The words struck harder than any blade. Did you fight for them, bleed for them, or were they simply handed to you, wrapped in silk, passed down by fathers who did the dying for you? His lip curled in disdain. "What you inherited without lifting a hand, I took with steel." A pause. "Every inch of it." Conan's chains rattled softly as he leaned forward, just enough to let his voice cut through the room like steel. "You sit on silk," he said, his tone low and dangerous, "drinking wine bought with the sweat of your people, and you dare speak of divine right." A harsh breath escaped him, half laugh, half snarl. "I clawed my way out of nothing, out of cold mountains, out of hunger, out of blood. Every step I took toward the throne, I paid for, with my own life and with the lives of those who stood against me." His gaze sharpened. "If ruling men must be earned, then I've earned it, not you." Silence tightened in the chamber. "I found Aquilonia rotting under a king like you," he continued, his voice gaining force. "A pampered fool who could recite his bloodline back 1,000 years, but couldn't protect his own people." His chains shifted as he straightened, defiant even now. The land was breaking, lords at war, peasants crushed under taxes, no justice, no order. They were bleeding. A pause. "Now," he said, "no noble in my kingdom dares raise a hand against the lowest man. Taxes are lighter than anywhere under the sun. My people live, not as cattle, but as men." His eyes locked onto them, burning, relentless. "And you dare call yourselves my betters?" The words hung in the air like a challenge no one wanted to answer. "What of your kingdoms?" he pressed. "Amalurus, your own brother, holds half your land and spits in your face. And you, Strabonus, your armies are busy fighting your own lords, trying to crush rebellions that never end." His lip curled in open disgust. "Your people are buried under taxes, beaten down until they can barely stand, and still you want more." A sharp, savage grin broke across his face. "You want mine." He leaned forward as far as the chains allowed, muscles tensing. "Take these off," he growled, "and I'll paint this floor with your brains." For a moment, the room felt smaller, tighter. Sotalanti watched it all with quiet amusement, a thin smile touching his lips as the kings shifted uncomfortably under Conan's words. Then he spoke, calm, controlled, cutting through the tension. "Everything you've said may be true," he said, "but it changes nothing." He gestured slightly. "Our plans are already in motion. You are no longer part of them." A servant stepped forward with a rolled parchment. "You have only one task left," Sota continued. "Sign this. Abdicate your throne in favor of Prince Arpello of Pelia." He let the name linger. "In return, You will be given a horse, weapons, and 5,000 gold coins. You will be escorted safely to the eastern frontier." Conan stared at him. Then he laughed again, short, sharp, utterly without humor. "So you throw me back into the world, exactly where I started, only now branded a traitor." His eyes narrowed. "Arpello," he muttered. "I suspected that butcher had his hands in this." He looked back up, contempt plain on his face. "You can't even steal honestly," he said. "You need a story to hide behind, a drop of royal blood, and suddenly he's your excuse." His voice dropped. "I'd sooner rot in hell." Amalra snapped. "You're a fool," he shouted, rising from his seat. "You're in chains. We can take your crown and your life whenever we please." Conan didn't answer with words. He spat. The gesture was sudden, brutal, and it struck Amalras full in the face. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Amalras screamed. Rage twisted his features as he lunged forward, snatching up his sword, driving toward Conan in a blind fury. But Sotha moved first. "Wait," he said sharply. "He is mine." "Out of my way," Amalras roared, half mad with humiliation and the blazing defiance in Conan's eyes. "Back," Sotha commanded. This time there was no calm in his voice, only force. His hand slipped from his sleeve, and with a flick of his fingers, a fine cloud of dust struck Amalras across the face. The effect was instant. Amalras cried out, staggering backward as if struck by something unseen. His sword slipped from his grasp, clattering to the floor. He clawed at his eyes, his body trembling, before collapsing onto the cushions behind him. The room fell still. The guards did not move. Strabonus said nothing, only reached for his cup, draining it quickly, though his hand trembled as he lowered it. Slowly, Amalras lowered his hands. His breathing steadied. The wildness faded from his eyes, replaced with something duller, slower, as if part of him had been quietly taken away. "I went blind," Amalras muttered, his voice tight with anger. "What did you do to me?" Sotha didn't even try to soften it this time. "Just a reminder of who truly holds power here." The calm mask was gone now. What stood in its place was something far more dangerous, something sharp, cruel, and completely unhidden. "A pinch of dust," he continued, almost casually, "taken from a forgotten tomb in Stygia. I cast it into your eyes, and for a moment you saw nothing." His gaze hardened. "Next time, I may not give your sight back." The meaning landed. Amalras stiffened, but only for a heartbeat. Then, like the polished court player he was, he forced a smile, shrugged lightly, and reached for his wine. To anyone watching, it looked effortless. But the fear was there, hidden, swallowed, controlled. Sotha had made his point, and now he moved on. His attention returned to Conan. The Cimmerian hadn't flinched once during the exchange. He had watched it all in silence, his expression unreadable, his presence as solid as stone. Sotha gave a small gesture. The guards moved immediately. They seized Conan and forced him forward, following the sorcerer out of the chamber into a long, winding corridor. The air shifted as they walked, heavy with perfume, thick and dreamlike. Gold and silver gleamed along the walls, intricate patterns catching the torchlight. Overhead, censers swayed gently, releasing slow, curling streams of scented smoke. It felt unreal, like walking through a dream or a trap. They turned, and everything changed. The next passage was narrower, darker. The walls were black, jet and jade, polished to a cold, unnatural sheen. The air here was different, still, watching. At the end stood a heavy brass door. Above it, set into the arch, was a human skull, grinning, waiting. Beside the door stood a man, if he could be called that. Fat, slack, his face twisted by something deeper than cruelty, something almost eager. A ring of keys hung from his hand, clinking softly as he shifted. Shukeli. Even the guards avoided looking at him for long. Sotha didn't need to. The eunuch bowed slightly and unlocked the door. It opened with a low, grinding sound. Beyond it, a staircase spiraled downward, deep, far deeper than any part of the citadel should go. They descended, step after step. The air grew colder, the light dimmer. The walls seemed to close in, swallowing sound, swallowing breath. It felt like sinking into the bones of the earth itself.
At last, they reached another door. Iron, massive, overbuilt, as if whatever lay beyond it needed to be kept in or out at any cost. Shukeli hesitated, just for a second. Even the guards shifted uneasily, glancing at the darkness beyond as if it might be looking back at them. Then the door opened. Behind it, another barrier. Steel bars, thick, unyielding, locked with a mechanism that could only be opened from the outside. No escape, ever. The barrier slid aside. They entered. The corridor beyond was carved from solid stone, floor, walls, ceiling, one endless stretch of cold, lifeless rock. The torches flickered weakly here, their light struggling against a darkness that felt aware, alive. Conan knew it instantly. They were no longer in the citadel. They were beneath it, far beneath. They dragged him to the wall and fastened his chains to a heavy iron ring set deep into the stone. The metal clanged shut, final and absolute. Above him, a single torch was wedged into a niche. Its light barely reached beyond a small circle. Everything else was shadow. The guards shifted, restless now, whispering, casting quick, nervous glances into the dark. Whatever this place was, they didn't want to stay. Sotha waved them away. They didn't hesitate. One by one, they hurried out, faster than soldiers should move, like men afraid something might reach out and drag them back. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. Sotha remained. He turned slowly to face Conan. In the dim light, his eyes gleamed unnaturally bright, reflecting the flame like something not entirely human. And when he smiled, his teeth caught the light, sharp, pale, almost like fangs. "And so this is where we part, Barbarian." Sotha's voice carried a quiet, mocking amusement as he turned away, his robes whispering softly against the stone. "I ride for Shamar. There's a siege to attend to, and in 10 days," he paused, glancing back over his shoulder, "I'll be sitting in your palace." His smile sharpened. "Tell me, what message shall I deliver to your women before I turn their beauty into something far more useful?" The words hit like a blade. Conan's answer came like an explosion. A curse, raw, savage, ancient, tore from his throat with such force it seemed to shake the very walls. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something primal, something dangerous. Sotha only laughed, a thin, chilling sound, and stepped away. For a fleeting moment, Conan caught sight of him through the iron bars, that tall, gaunt silhouette like a carrion bird retreating into the dark. Then the gate slammed shut. The outer door followed with a heavy, echoing clang. And just like that, he was alone. Silence settled over the chamber like a weight. Conan tested the chains, slowly, methodically. His limbs were free, but it meant nothing. The iron around his waist was thick, unyielding, biting into his flesh. The chain itself was massive, each link as wide as his thumb, forged to hold something far stronger than any ordinary man.
He pulled once, twice, nothing. The ring set into the wall didn't shift even a fraction. It was anchored deep, driven through solid stone, secured beyond reach. This wasn't a prison built to hold. It was built to keep something contained. A low curse slipped from his lips. For the first time since the battle, something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. Not fear, but something close to it. The darkness pressed in beyond the torchlight, thick and suffocating. It didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, watching, waiting. Conan's breath slowed, but his mind raced. He knew this wasn't just imprisonment. If they had wanted him dead, they could have ended it on the battlefield or in the chamber above. No, they had brought him here for a reason, a purpose, and whatever that purpose was, it waited in the dark. His jaw tightened. For a fleeting instant, a bitter thought crossed his mind, sharp and unwelcome. He could have lived. Signed the parchment, taken the gold, walked away. But even as the thought formed, it died, because he already knew the truth. Even if they brought him back now, freed his chains, placed the offer before him again, his answer would not change. He would not trade his kingdom for his life. Not anymore. Strange, he thought. Once he had taken that throne for himself, by strength, by ambition, by sheer will. But somewhere along the way, it had become more than that. It had become a responsibility. And now he would rather die than betray it. Tsotha's final words echoed in his mind. A cold, sickening fury rose inside him. He saw their faces, those who had trusted him, who had stood beside him, who had shared in his victories. He remembered laughter, warmth, fleeting moments of peace between battles, and then the thought of what might happen to them. Something snapped. A roar tore from Conan's throat, wild, furious, inhuman. It echoed through the underground halls, rebounding off stone and darkness alike, a sound so filled with rage it seemed impossible that it came from a single man. It was not the cry of a king. It was the cry of something caged, something that would not stay caged long. The echo of his own roar came back to him, twisted, distorted, wrong. It bounced through the darkness, stretching into something almost unrecognizable. For a moment, Conan stiffened, as if another voice had answered him from the depths. Then reality settled in again, slowly. He was still chained, still alone, still deep beneath the earth. His gaze drifted outward, beyond the weak circle of torchlight. The darkness there felt heavier now, more real, less like emptiness and more like something that had been waiting long before he arrived. A chill slid down his spine. He had heard the stories. Even in distant lands, far from Koth, men spoke of Stothalanti's underground halls in hushed voices, of what lay beneath the citadel, not just dungeons, but something worse. Places where the laws of nature were broken, where living things were twisted into shapes they were never meant to take, where human, beast, and things far darker were used as raw material for experiments that should never exist. And now he stood inside those stories. A memory surfaced. A poet, mad they had called him, Rinaldo. The man had once whispered of these depths, of what he had seen here, creatures that defied reason, shapes that should not breathe, horrors that haunted his words long after he left. At the time, Conan had dismissed it as madness. Now, he wasn't so sure. He remembered the night he had ended that man's life, steel flashing, blood spilling, the chaos of betrayal within his own palace. The poet's voice, wild and broken, had echoed even then, speaking of pits, of things that crawled in darkness. Conan had silenced him, but not the memory, not the words. They came back now, clearer than ever. And suddenly, a sound, soft, barely there, but unmistakable. Conan froze. every muscle in his body locked as his senses sharpened, straining into the silence. His breath slowed, his heartbeat thundered in his ears. There it was again, a faint, dragging whisper against stone. Not footsteps, not human. Something sliding. A cold tension crept through him. Then he saw it. At the edge of the light, just beyond the reach of the torch, a shape moved. Vast, unclear, but wrong. It rose slowly from the darkness, its outline shifting, expanding, as if the shadows themselves were forming around it. 2 points of light appeared, dull at first, then brighter. Eyes, watching him, unblinking. The shape lifted higher, closer, and then, bit by bit, it revealed itself. A head emerged first, massive, wedge-shaped, unnatural in its size. The surface of it caught the faint light, revealing pale, glistening scales that seemed almost colorless, like something that had never seen the sun. More followed. Coils, endless coils, sliding forward with a slow, terrible grace. It kept coming and coming, until Conan understood this was no ordinary creature. This was something grown in darkness, something that belonged here. A serpent, but not one any man should ever face. Its body stretched across the stone like a living river of pale scales, its length beyond reason. Its head alone was the size of a horse's skull, its neck rising high, swaying slightly as it studied him. The air grew thick, heavy. Its presence filled the chamber. The creature coiled before him, vast loops folding over one another, its body encircling the space like a tightening noose. Its head lowered slowly, inch by inch, until it hovered just before his face. Too close. Its tongue flicked out, thin, forked, tasting the air. It almost touched him. The smell hit him next. Rotting, foul, suffocating. Conan's stomach twisted, but he did not look away. Could not. Those eyes held him. Cold, yellow, ancient, alive, with something dark and knowing. For a moment, something wild surged inside him, an instinct older than thought, a violent urge to strike, to grab that thick neck, to tear and crush and destroy. He had done it before. Years ago, on distant shores, he had faced a great serpent and broken it with his bare hands in a battle that nearly killed him. But this was different. This creature was larger, faster, deadlier, and venomous. He saw the fangs now, long, curved, gleaming faintly in the dim light. Drops of clear liquid clung to their tips, slowly falling, hissing faintly as they touched the stone. Death. Instant. Certain. Conan's muscles tensed. Every instinct screamed at him to move. But he didn't, because something deeper than thought locked him in place. Instinct. Raw, blind, absolute. Every fiber of his being screamed to survive, to endure, even when reason whispered that death was already waiting, even when a single reckless movement might end it faster. So he stood like iron. The serpent rose higher, its massive body coiled and tightened, its pale length shifting with a slow, terrible grace. Its head lifted above him now, towering, swaying, studying. Then it drifted toward the torch. A single drop fell. It struck his bare thigh. The pain was instant, blinding, like fire driven straight into flesh. Conan's body screamed to react, to flinch, to recoil, to roar, but he crushed it down, forced it into silence. The agony tore through him, red and violent, surging up into his skull, yet outwardly, nothing. Not a twitch, Not a breath, not even a flicker in his eyes. He endured it, as if carved from stone. The serpent hovered, uncertain. Its head swayed slightly, its cold gaze fixed on him, as if trying to decide whether the figure before it was alive or merely another corpse in this place of horrors. Seconds stretched. Then, a sound. Loud, sudden. The outer door slammed open with a harsh metallic crash that shattered the silence. The serpent reacted instantly. In a blur of motion that defied its size, it whipped around, its massive coils unraveling in a rush, and vanished into the darkness, its body sliding away with a long, fading hiss. Gone. Just like that. The chamber fell still again, but not empty. The door remained open. Light spilled in from beyond, flickering against the stone. The iron grill slid aside, and a shape appeared in the doorway. Huge, broad, a shadow given form. It stepped inside, slowly, deliberately, pulling the gate partially closed behind it, but not yet. As it moved closer, into the reach of the torchlight, its features became clear. A giant of a man, dark-skinned, bare-bodied, muscles thick and powerful beneath the dim glow. In one hand he carried a massive sword, in the other
keys. A ring of them. They clinked softly as he stepped forward. Then he spoke. The words came in a rough coastal dialect, familiar. Conan's eyes narrowed. He answered in the same tongue, recognition flickering beneath the surface. The man grinned, wide, fierce, almost feral. "I've wanted to meet you for a long time, Amra," he said, using the name Conan had once carried among the southern seas, the name whispered by those who knew him as a pirate, the Lion. The giant lifted the keys slightly, letting them sway in the torchlight. He continued, his voice low with excitement. "Do you see these?" He held them closer. "The keys to your chains. I took them from Shukeli himself." A pause. "What will you give me for them?" Hope hit Conan like a sudden flame. 10,000 gold coins, he said immediately, his voice sharp, urgent. The man's grin widened. "Not enough." He laughed, a deep, savage sound. "Not enough for what I risk. The things in this darkness could tear me apart, and if Shukeli discovers what I've done—" He shook his head, still smiling, but his eyes gleamed dangerously. "No, more." Conan's jaw tightened. 15,000, he said, "and a palace in Poitain." The reaction was explosive. The giant threw his head back and shouted in wild delight, stamping his foot against the stone. "More," he roared, "more! What else will you give me?" Something snapped. The fragile thread of hope twisted into anger, hot, sharp, immediate. Conan's eyes blazed. "You greedy beast," he growled, his voice thick with fury. "If I were free, I'd break your spine where you stand." He leaned forward as far as the chains allowed. "Did Shukeli send you here to mock me?" "Shukeli knows nothing of this," the giant said, leaning closer, his breath hot, his eyes burning. "I came on my own." He studied Conan's face, searching, remembering. "I knew you once, long ago, before chains, before slavery." His voice shifted, harder now. "Do you remember Abambi?" A flicker passed through Conan's eyes. "The night your raiders came from the sea," the man continued, his tone tightening. "Fire, blood, screams in the streets." He stepped closer. "Before the palace of King Ajaga, you cut down a warrior, and another fled." His lips pulled back in something that wasn't quite a smile. "The one you killed was my brother." A pause. "The one who ran was me."
Silence pressed in between them. "I have waited a long time for this," he said softly. "A blood price must be paid, Amra." Conan's chains rattled faintly as he shifted. "Free me," he growled, "and I'll give you gold enough to drown in." The man's eyes flashed. "Gold?" he echoed, almost amused. "Gold is nothing." His voice dropped. "You cannot buy blood with gold." He lifted the sword slightly. "The price is your head." The final word tore from him in a shriek that echoed through the stone, like something broken loose from sanity. Conan tensed, not in fear, but in rage. He strained against the chains, every instinct rebelling against the thought of dying like this, bound, helpless, butchered. Then something changed. His eyes shifted past the man's shoulder into the dark. And what he saw there froze him. A shape, moving, silent, massive. "Tatha will never know," the giant was saying, lost in his own fury, blind to everything else, blind to everything else. He raised the sword high, muscles tightening, preparing to strike. "I will have your head, Amra." But death had already chosen its prey. The shadow behind him surged forward, fast, too fast. The impact was monstrous. The serpent's head slammed down with a force that shook the corridor. The man didn't even have time to cry out. One instant he stood, alive, burning with vengeance. The next, gone. His body was hurled aside like a broken doll, crashing across the stone. The sword flew from his hands. The keys scattered, clattering sharply as they struck the ground. Then the coils came. Pale, massive, relentless. They wrapped around him, tightening, crushing. Bones snapped, loud, sickening, echoing through the tunnel as the serpent dragged its prey back into the darkness. And then, silence. Conan didn't move, couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the ground, on the keys. They lay just out of reach, so close, too far. His breath quickened. The chain held him tight, too tight. For a heartbeat, everything hung on the edge. Then he acted. Slowly, carefully, he slipped one foot free from his sandal, stretched, pushed. His toes brushed metal, slipped, tried again, and caught it. The keys scraped against the stone as he dragged them closer, inch by inch, every movement precise, controlled, desperate. Finally, he got hold of them. His fingers closed around the ring. The sound that rose in his chest was almost a roar, but he forced it down, choking it back into silence. Now, fast. The locks were heavy, stubborn, but his hands moved with fierce urgency. One, then the other. A click, then another. The chains fell away. Freedom. It hit him like a surge of fire. Conan rose, fully, for the first time since his capture. He seized the fallen sword, its weight familiar in his grip, grounding him, restoring something that never truly left. His eyes swept the darkness. Nothing. Only silence. Only shadows. Somewhere out there, the serpent fed, tearing apart what remained of the man who had come to kill him. But Conan no longer cared. He was no longer prey. Now, he was something far more dangerous.
Conan moved fast, The moment his chains fell away, he was already crossing the chamber, silent, deadly, driven by instinct. A few long strides brought him to the doorway. Freedom was right there, within reach. Then, laughter, high, sharp, twisted. It sliced through the silence like a blade. Before Conan could react, the iron grill slammed shut in front of him with a violent crash. The bolt dropped into place with a final echoing clang. Too late. Through the bars, a face leered at him, bloated, grinning, monstrous in its delight. Shukeli. The eunuch's eyes gleamed with vicious triumph. His lips curled into a grotesque smile as if savoring every second of Conan's frustration. He had followed. He had been watching, and now he thought he had won. But he had made one mistake. He hadn't seen the sword. Conan struck. There was no warning, no hesitation. The blade shot forward between the bars like a striking serpent, fast, precise, unstoppable. Shukeli's laughter snapped into a scream, a wet, choking sound. The eunuch doubled over, his grin collapsing into horror as his body folded in on itself. For a moment, he seemed to bow almost respectfully before crumpling to the ground, his hands clutching uselessly at the ruin of his own body. Then he was still. Conan pulled the blade back, a low, savage snarl rumbling in his chest. Satisfaction flickered, but it died quickly. Because nothing had changed, he was still trapped. The keys were useless now. The bolt could only be opened from the outside. He tested the bars, solid, unyielding, harder than steel itself. Striking them would do nothing but ruin his weapon. His eyes narrowed. Then he noticed the marks. Deep gouges, jagged, unnatural, scarred into the metal. Not made by tools, by something else. Something with teeth. Something powerful enough to try and fail. A cold thought passed through him. Whatever lived in these depths, it wasn't alone. Conan turned away. There was only one option left. He took the torch from the wall, lifted it high, and stepped into the corridor beyond. The darkness closed in immediately. The torchlight pushed it back, but only just. Shadows clung to the edges, shifting, watching, as if waiting for the flame to falter. He moved forward, slowly, carefully, his sword ready. There were openings on either side, dark passages leading who knew where, but he ignored them, keeping to the main path. His eyes scanned the ground ahead, wary of hidden traps, unseen drops. Then, a sound. Soft, broken, weeping. Conan froze. A woman. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was crying. His jaw tightened. Another victim, another soul trapped in Tosa's nightmare. With a low curse, he turned toward the sound, stepping into a narrower passage where the air grew damp and cold. The crying grew louder as he advanced. Closer, clearer. He raised the torch. A shape stirred ahead, vague, shifting, barely visible in the shadows. Conan stepped forward and stopped. Horror hit him like a blow. The thing before him, it wasn't human. It wasn't anything that should exist. Its form was wrong, unstable, shifting like something that couldn't decide what it was meant to be. Its mass sprawled across the stone, thick and glistening, trembling as if alive in ways it shouldn't be. It reminded him, vaguely, of an octopus, but twisted, broken. Its limbs were too short, too malformed for its bulk. Its body wasn't flesh as it should be, but something else, something soft, gelatinous, quivering with every movement. It made his stomach turn. From within that obscene mass, a head rose, frog-like, bloated, and from its mouth, the weeping. Those sounds, those human, pitiable cries, came from that thing. Conan felt something cold grip his spine. The creature saw him, its eyes large, wet, unnatural, fixed on him, and the weeping changed, warped, twisted, into a high, shrill giggle that scraped against his nerves like broken glass. It moved, dragging itself forward in slow, sickening motions. Closer, closer. Conan stepped back. Then again. Every instinct screamed at him, not to fight, not this, not that. His grip tightened on the sword, but for once, he hesitated. What was it made of? Could steel even harm it, or would the blade sink into that trembling mass and do nothing at all?
The thought alone made his skin crawl. The creature lurched closer. That was enough. Conan turned and ran, not in panic, not blindly, but with the cold, clear decision of a man who knew when something was beyond even his strength. Behind him, the thing's laughter echoed through the tunnel, high, broken, inhuman, and Conan did not look back. For a few terrible moments, it followed him. He could hear it, flopping, dragging its grotesque bulk along the stone, that awful laughter echoing behind him. But it wasn't just the sound, it was how it sounded. Too human. That was what made it unbearable. It wasn't the shriek of a beast. It wasn't the cry of something mindless. It was laughter, recognizable, obscene, familiar. The same note he had heard long ago in dark places, in crowded streets where helpless victims were humiliated before cheering crowds, when suffering was something to be enjoyed. That same note of twisted delight now echoed through the tunnels behind him, but coming from that thing, that abomination. A cold realization crept through him. This was no natural creature. This was something made, something shaped by hands that had no right to touch the fabric of life at all. Tosa. Only a mind like his could twist existence into something so wrong. Conan ran harder, not in fear, but in rejection, in instinctive revolt against what he had just seen. He burst toward the main passage, but before he reached it, the tunnel opened suddenly into a small chamber where several paths crossed. He barely saw it. Something low and squat lay on the floor ahead. Then, impact. His foot struck it. It shrieked, a thin, piercing sound, and Conan was thrown forward violently. The world spun as he crashed to the ground. The torch flew from his hand, struck stone, and went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Absolute. Conan pushed himself up, shaking off the daze and his breath steadying as he reached into nothingness. His hands met only empty air, then rough stone. He turned, paused, listened. Nothing. No laughter, no movement. But he knew better to trust that silence. His sense of direction was gone. The tunnels twisted, intersected. He had lost the main corridor. He didn't waste time searching for the torch. Even if he found it, it was useless now. Instead, he moved. Hands outstretched, he felt along the walls, tracing the openings of the tunnels. One led left, another right, a third ahead.
He chose one, at random, and stepped into the dark. Time lost meaning. There was no light, no sound but his own breath and the soft scrape of his boots against stone. He moved carefully, every step measured, every sense straining. Then, he stopped. Abruptly. Something deep within him, older than thought, older than reason, told him to stop. Danger. Close. Very close. He dropped to his hands and knees without hesitation. Slowly, he crept forward, fingers reaching out into the unseen. Then, nothing. The ground ended. His hand hovered over empty space. He shifted slightly, probing further, and felt the edge, a sharp drop where the tunnel floor simply vanished. A pit. Deep. He leaned forward, testing the sides. The stone fell away sharply, slick and damp beneath his fingers. He extended his sword across the gap. It barely reached the opposite edge. He could jump it? Easily. But that wasn't the problem. He was in the wrong place. The main passage lay somewhere behind him, and this was something else entirely. Then, he felt it. A movement of air. Faint. Rising. Not from ahead, but from below. A cold current brushed against his face, stirring his hair. Conan froze. That shouldn't be possible. He was deep beneath the earth, far below the level of the city. No wind should reach this place. No breath of the outer world could find its way down here. And yet, it came from the pit.
cold, alive, unnatural. He strained to listen and heard it. Faint, distant, a rhythm, slow, like drums, beating somewhere far below the world of men. A shudder ran through him. Something was down there. Not just depth, not just emptiness. Something. Watching. Waiting. Conan rose slowly to his feet and began to step back. Carefully. Quietly. Then, it came. Not a sound. Not a shape. But a presence. Something rose from the pit. He couldn't see it, couldn't hear it clearly, but he felt it. A shift in the air, a weight, a nearness that shouldn't exist. Something had come up. Invisible, intangible, but aware. Aware of him. Conan didn't wait. He turned and ran. Back the way he had come, now guided only by instinct, driven by something deeper than reason. Because whatever was rising from that pit, it was not meant to be found. A faint glow appeared ahead of him. Just a spark, tiny, red, barely alive. Conan moved toward it, drawn by instinct more than sight. The darkness still pressed close around him, swallowing distance, warping space. He walked longer than he expected. Then suddenly, impact. He struck stone hard enough to jar his bones. The spark was at his feet. He crouched quickly. The torch. Dead, almost. But not entirely. At its tip, a small ember still glowed, stubborn and alive. Carefully, he lifted it and breathed onto it. Once. Twice. The ember brightened. Flared. Then, fire. A thin flame flickered back to life, pushing the darkness away just enough for him to see. Conan exhaled slowly. He recognized the place now, the crossing of tunnels, the chamber where he had fallen. His sense of direction snapped back into place. Good. He turned, locating the passage that would lead him back to the main corridor, and stepped forward. Then, the flame wavered, violently, as if something had breathed on it. Conan stopped. Slowly, he raised the torch, looked around. Nothing. Only stone, shadow, silence. But he felt it. Close. Too close. Something was there. Not flesh, not shape, not anything his eyes could grasp. But it was there. A presence. Thick. Unseen, hanging in the air around him. It pressed against his senses in a way he could not explain. As if something without form drifted near him, touching, watching, tasting. His skin crawled. His grip tightened on the sword. He swung. Hard. The blade cut through the air. Nothing. No resistance. No impact. Like smoke. Or cobwebs. A cold wave of dread surged through him. This was worse than anything he had faced so far. Because this had no body. No shape, No way to fight. Something brushed past him. He couldn't see it, but he felt it. A breath. Cold. Foul. Burning against his back like something rotten exhaling. That was enough. Conan turned and ran. Not blindly, but fast, controlled, driven by a primal need to get away from whatever that thing was. The tunnel opened ahead of him. He burst into the main corridor and stopped. The presence was gone. Just like that. No breath. No weight. No unseen horror pressing in around him. Only the corridor. Wide. Empty. For a moment, he stood still, listening. Then he moved. Forward. The silence didn't last. From deep beneath the earth, from tunnels stretching in every direction, came sounds that twisted the mind. Laughter. High, broken, inhuman. Shrieks that echoed and warped into something else before they faded. Long, low howls that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. And once, a sound that froze him mid-step. The laughing cry of a hyena. But it didn't end there. It twisted, changed, and broke into words. Human words. Shrieking something vile and unholy before dissolving into madness.
Conan moved on, his sword ready, his eyes sharp. Shadows shifted at the edges of his vision. In the mouths of the side tunnels, shapes moved, brief glimpses of things that should not exist. Twisted outlines, crawling forms, watching, waiting. But none of them entered the corridor. They stayed back. He could hear them breathing, wet, hungry, the sound of lips parting, of something tasting the air. And their eyes, he could feel them, burning into him from the darkness. Then he understood. A sound behind him, soft at first, then clearer, a heavy, dragging slither across stone. Conan reacted instantly. He leapt sideways into a nearby tunnel and smothered his torch, plunging himself into darkness once more. He didn't move, didn't breathe, and listened. The serpent passed, slow, heavy, its massive body scraping along the corridor, sluggish now after feeding. The sound of it filled the space, inevitable, unstoppable. From somewhere close, too close, something whimpered and scurried away in fear. Even the other horrors fled from it. That was when Conan realized the truth. This corridor? This was its territory, its hunting ground. Everything else avoided it. Everything else feared it. The sound faded. The serpent moved on. Conan remained still for a moment longer. Then slowly, he let out a breath. Strangely, of all the things he had seen down here, the serpent felt almost familiar, understandable. It was death, simple, clean. It would kill the body and nothing more. But the others, the things that laughed like humans, that wept, that drifted unseen through the air, they were something else, something worse. They didn't just threaten life, they threatened the mind, the soul. And in that moment, Conan knew. This place was not a prison, it was a nightmare made real. When the serpent's slithering faded into the distance, Conan stepped back into the corridor. He relit the torch, its flame weak now, little more than a stubborn glow clinging to life, but enough to see, enough to move. He followed the path the creature had taken, keeping his distance,
every step measured. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It felt watchful. Then, a sound. Low, broken, a moan. It came from a nearby tunnel, dark, narrow, breathing damp air into the corridor like a wound in the earth. Conan hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep moving, but something else pulled him. Curiosity, or perhaps something deeper. He turned toward the sound, raised the dying torch, and stepped inside. The passage opened suddenly into a wider chamber, a cell. Bars ran from floor to ceiling, thick, close set, forged into the stone itself, and behind them, a man, or what had once been a man. He lay sprawled on the ground, his body bound, not by chains, but by something alive, a vine. It grew straight out of the stone floor, thick as a man's thigh, its surface slick and pulsing faintly as if blood moved within it. From it spread a mass of tendrils, long, flexible, winding tightly around the man's limbs and torso. They didn't just hold him, they clung to him, wrapped around him with a disturbing intimacy, like something that enjoyed the contact. The leaves were strange, sharp, pointed, and the flowers, crimson, but not the red of nature, not the soft red of petals. This was darker, deeper, wrong, the color of something corrupted. One blossom hovered directly over the man's mouth. He moaned again, a low, broken sound, barely human. His head rolled weakly, his eyes locking onto Conan's, but there was nothing behind them, no awareness, no thought, just emptiness, the eyes of a mind already gone. Conan's jaw tightened. Then the flower moved, slowly, deliberately. It lowered itself and pressed against the man's lips. His body convulsed, a sudden, violent reaction, his limbs straining, twisting in agony, as if something inside him was being drained or fed upon. The vine responded. It shuddered, trembled, its tendrils tightened, quivering as though in pleasure. The leaves rattled in a sharp hissing sound, and the color of the plant deepened, darkening into something richer, more venomous, alive, feeding. Conan didn't need to understand it. He knew enough. This was wrong. This was suffering, and whatever that man had been, he did not deserve this. Without hesitation, Conan moved. He found the barred door, a heavy lock securing it, and quickly searched the keys he had taken. One fit. The door creaked open. The moment he stepped inside, the plant reacted, violently. The flowers snapped open, spreading wide like the hood of a striking serpent. The tendrils lifted, rising toward him, leaves rattling with a sharp hissing sound. This was no mindless growth. It knew he was there. He felt it, a presence, hostile, aware. It hated him. Conan didn't stop. He stepped closer, eyes locked at the base of the thing, the thick central stem anchoring it to the stone. That was the heart. That was where it lived. The tendrils lashed toward him. He moved first. The sword flashed. One clean strike. The blade bit deep and cut through. The effect was instant. The vine exploded into motion. It recoiled violently, its grip loosening as the man's body was flung aside like a discarded husk. The tendrils whipped wildly, coiling and knotting, thrashing at the ground like a dying serpent. The leaves rattled in a frantic storm. The flowers opened and closed in rapid spasms, their crimson petals shuddering uncontrollably. Then the vine weakened. The slow slowed. The color began to fade. The rich, unnatural crimson drained into a pale, sickly hue. From the severed stem, A thick white liquid oozed out, pooling onto the stone. The plant sagged, collapsed, dead. The chamber fell silent again. Only the faint crackle of the dying torch remained, and the man lay still.
Conan stood there, watching the thing die. The vine writhed, weakened, then went still. Silence crept back into the chamber. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, a sound. Behind him. He turned instantly, sword rising, ready to strike, and froze. The man was standing, on his feet, alive. Not the broken creature from moments ago, not the empty shell with dead eyes and slack lips. This was someone else. The change was impossible. Gone was the dull, mindless stare. In its place, intelligence, sharp, deep, watching. The man's face seemed to reshape itself as Conan stared, as if a mask had been torn away to reveal something far more formidable beneath. His posture was different now, straight, controlled. There was something refined about him, something noble. It showed in the way he stood, in the shape of his features, in the quiet authority of his presence. Then he spoke, and what he said made no sense at all. What year is this? His voice was steady, cultured, completely at odds with the wretch Conan had just freed. Conan blinked once, then answered. The 10th day of the month Uluk, in the year of the gazelle. The man exhaled slowly. 10 years, he murmured, almost to himself. His hand rose to his forehead, fingers pressing lightly as if trying to gather scattered thoughts. 10 years, he repeated again, quieter now. No wonder. Nothing is clear yet. His gaze sharpened, focused on Conan. Who are you? Conan, he replied simply, once of Cimmeria, now king of Aquilonia. For the first time, surprise flickered in the man's eyes. A king? He said. And Nemedes. I killed him, took the throne that same night. For a brief second, something like amusement touched the stranger's lips. Then it was gone. My thanks, then, though I confess, my mind still feels like something dragged up from a grave. He studied Conan more closely. You freed me, he continued. Tell me, why did you cut the plant instead of pulling it from the roots? Conan's answer came without hesitation. Because I don't touch what I don't understand. A faint nod. Wise, the man said quietly. Very wise. He glanced toward the dead vine. If you had torn it free, he went on, you might have found things clinging beneath, things no blade could save you from. His eyes lifted again. The roots of that plant do not belong to this world. A chill passed through the chamber. Conan narrowed his eyes. Who are you? He demanded. The man held his gaze. Peleus. The name hit like a blow. Conan stiffened. Peleus? He repeated. The sorcerer? Sotholante's rival? The man gave a thin, almost bitter smile. The same. I heard you vanished, Conan said. I did, from the world above. His gaze drifted briefly to the dead plant, but Sotha preferred to keep me alive. In here? He gestured faintly around them. A prison more cruel than chains. His voice darkened. That thing, he said, nodding toward the vine, came from beyond this world. Seeds drifting through black voids, taking root only where corruption runs deep enough. His eyes returned to Conan. It fed on me. Not my flesh, my mind. Conan said nothing, but he listened. It drained me, Peleus continued, his tone quiet, controlled, but something burned beneath it. Day after day, year after year. It stripped away memory, thought, will. I became
Empty. His hand clenched slightly. A shell. 10 years, he whispered. 10 years of nothing. Silence settled between them. Conan shifted his grip on the sword. He didn't know whether to believe this man, whether he stood before a sorcerer or a madman. But one thing was certain. There was no madness in those eyes. Only clarity. And something else. Something dangerous. Conan said nothing. He simply stood there, watching, waiting. The man's gaze drifted past Conan, unfocused, distant, yet seeing far more than the eye could grasp. "Tell me," he said slowly, "is the Black Wizard still in Khor-Shemish?" He paused, then shook his head slightly. "No, you need not answer." His gaze sharpened again, fixing on Conan, but not quite looking at him. "My powers, they stir, faintly, like embers waking beneath ash." A moment passed. "I see fragments," he continued. "A battlefield, blood, betrayal." His voice grew quieter. "A king, trapped." Then suddenly, "I see him," Pelias said, almost with certainty now. "Sothalanti riding hard with Strabonus and the king of Ophir." A thin smile touched his lips. Good. There was something cold in that word. Very good. He turned slightly, as if already planning something far beyond this place. "My strength is not yet what it was," he admitted. "Not after 10 years of emptiness." His fingers flexed slowly, as if testing the return of power. "I cannot face him yet." His gaze flickered back to Conan. "Not yet. But I will." A pause. "I need time. Time to gather what I have lost, to call back what was taken from me." Then he straightened. "For now, we leave." He gestured toward the tunnels. "Out of this place." Conan lifted the keys with a frustrated clatter. "Easier said than done," he muttered. "The outer gate is locked from the outside. No way through." Pelias gave a faint, almost amused laugh. "There is another way." A brief pause. "But it goes down." His tone made it clear enough. Not an option. "Come," he added. "Let us see this gate." He moved ahead, his steps uncertain at first, like a man relearning how to walk, but with each stride his confidence returned. Strength flowed back into his limbs, into his posture. Conan followed, uneasy. "There's a serpent in these tunnels, huge, dangerous. We should be careful."
Pelias didn't slow. "I know it," he said grimly. "Satha, the Old One." His voice carried a hint of something darker now. "I watched it feed." Conan glanced at him. "On what?" Pelias didn't look back. "On my followers." A beat. 10 of them. Silence followed that. Then Conan spoke again, his voice edged with curiosity. "These pits, Tsotha built them for his creatures?" Pelias shook his head. "No. They were here long before him." His voice took on a distant tone, half memory, half story. "This place is older than the city above it. When Khor-Shemish was first built, there were ruins here already, remnants of something forgotten." He walked slowly as he spoke, as if each step stirred buried memories. "The first king, Khosus, built his palace on this hill, and beneath it they found a sealed doorway. They opened it." He paused briefly. "A mistake. They found these tunnels, these chambers, much as they are now." His voice dropped slightly. "But something found them too." "What happened?" Conan asked. Pelias gave a faint, humorless smile. "The king's grand vizier entered these depths, and never truly came back." He glanced sideways. "They said he fell into a well, but Khosus knew better. He sealed the place again, abandoned the palace, built another, far from here. And even then he fled.
"Why?" Conan asked. Pelias's expression darkened. One morning, they found black mold spreading across the marble floors of his new palace. He let that linger. No one knew how it got there. A silence. Then, "He fled his own kingdom after that," Pelias finished. The two men walked on. "And later?" Conan pressed. "Another king rebuilt the city," Pelias said, "raised a fortress over these ruins. And then came Tsotha." Now there was something different in his voice, something sharper. He reopened the way, claimed the pits, made them his own. They walked a few more steps before Pelias spoke again. "There is a well down here," he said quietly. Conan's expression tightened. "I found one," he said. Pelias nodded. "So did Tsotha. And he came back." A pause. "But not unchanged." Conan frowned. "What do you mean?" Pelias didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower than before. "I saw him after," he said. In his eyes, something had shifted. Something not human. The air seemed colder. Then Pelias added, almost as an afterthought, "There are stories." Conan glanced at him. "What kind of stories?" Pelias's lips curved faintly. "Dark ones." He looked ahead again. "They say he was not born as other men are, that something touched this world and left a trace behind." His voice dropped to a whisper, "and that trace became Tsotha-Lanti." Silence followed them through the corridor, and, somewhere deep below, something unseen listened. Conan stopped dead, then shouted a sharp warning and shoved Pelias back. Before them, it rose. Sotha. The great serpent reared up from the shadows, its immense white coils shimmering in the torchlight like something carved from frost and death. Its head swayed high above them, and its cold yellow eyes burned with an ancient, merciless hatred. Conan didn't hesitate. He braced himself. This was it. No escape, no trick, no second chance. His muscles coiled like steel as he prepared for a final savage charge to drive the burning torch into that monstrous face and follow with a killing stroke, even if it meant his own end. But the serpent didn't strike. It wasn't looking at him. Its gaze shifted, past him, to Pelias. Conan glanced back instinctively. The sorcerer stood there, calm, unmoving, arms folded, smiling. And something changed. Conan saw it happen. In the serpent's eyes, hatred faded, slowly, unnaturally, replaced by something else, something Conan had never seen in such a creature before. Fear, pure, unmistakable. The great beast recoiled backward in a violent rush, the air itself seeming to tear as it fled. In an instant, it vanished into the darkness, leaving only the fading echo of its passage. Silence fell. Conan lowered his sword slightly, his breath steady, but his mind not. "What did it see?" Conan asked slowly. Pelias didn't answer immediately. Then, "The things that crawl and coil," he said quietly, "they see more than men do." He turned his head slightly. "You saw a man." A faint smile touched his lips. "It saw something else." Conan felt a cold sensation creep along his spine. Something in Pelias's voice, in his stillness, in that faint, knowing smile. It wasn't right. For a fleeting moment, a thought crossed Conan's mind. Simple, direct. Kill him, now, before whatever stood beside him revealed its true nature.
His fingers tightened on the sword, but he didn't move, because at that moment, they reached the gate. The steel grille loomed before them, black against the torchlight beyond, and slumped against it, Shukeli.
just as Conan had left him, dead. Collapsed in a twisted heap, his body half propped against the bars, blood pooled beneath him. Pelias laughed. The sound was sharp, hard, ugly. "Well now," he said, "look who guards the door." He stepped closer, eyes gleaming. "Shukeli," he went on mockingly, "the great tormentor, the butcher of helpless men." His voice dripped with contempt. "I remember you." He leaned slightly forward. "Do you sleep, Shukeli?" No answer. "Why so still?" Pelias continued softly. "Why does your belly sag like a slaughtered pig?" Conan shifted uneasily. "He's dead," he muttered. Pelias smiled wider. "Dead?" he echoed. "Alive?" He shrugged. "What does it matter?" Then he clapped his hands. Sharp, sudden. The sound cracked through the corridor like a command. "Rise, Shukeli." His voice changed. Deeper, harder, filled with something that made the air itself feel wrong. "Rise from the floor. Rise from your blood. Rise and open the door." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a sound. Low, wet. A groan that didn't belong to the living. Conan's body went rigid. His skin crawled because the corpse moved. Slowly, unnaturally. Shukeli's hands twitched, fat fingers clawing weakly at the stone, as if searching for something they could no longer understand. Then he pushed himself up, unsteady, jerking, like a puppet dragged upright by invisible strings. Conan stared, unable to look away. The eunuch's head lolled. His eyes, wide open, were empty, glassy, dead. There was nothing behind them, no life, no awareness, only a hollow stare. And yet he moved, step by step, dragging himself upright, swaying grotesquely as his torn body struggled to obey a will that was no longer his own. Blood dripped, and worse, from the great wound in his belly, his entrails hung loose, swaying with each clumsy movement. They brushed the floor, tangling beneath his feet. He stumbled over them, but did not stop, did not feel, did not care, because he was no longer alive. Conan's grip tightened unconsciously on his sword. This was wrong, beyond wrong. But Pelias only watched, smiling, cold, unmoved. Shukeli reached the gate. His hands found the bolt, fumbled, slipped, then caught it. Slowly, mechanically, he began to move it, like a thing without a soul, like something already claimed by death. Pelias stepped through the open grill as if nothing had happened, as if the dead did not rise at his command. Conan followed, but not willingly. He forced himself forward, squeezing past the bars, his body slick with sweat, every instinct recoiling from the thing slumped beside him. Shukeli still stood there, barely, his ruined body sagging, his dead hands clutching the iron as if they still served some purpose. Conan didn't look at him again. He couldn't. He moved past, fast. Behind him, a sound. Heavy, wet. He turned sharply. The corpse had fallen. Shukeli lay sprawled at the base of the gate, lifeless once more, truly lifeless now. Whatever force had animated him was gone. Pelias didn't even glance back. "His work is done," he said lightly, "and now he returns to where he belongs." Conan said nothing, but something deep inside him recoiled. They climbed, up the long, winding stairs, out of the depths, away from the suffocating horrors below. Step by step, the air changed, less damp, less foul, until finally they reached the door crowned with the grinning skull. Beyond it, silence. Conan tightened his grip on his sword, expecting guards, soldiers, and ambush. Nothing came. The corridors of the citadel lay empty, still. They passed through shadowed halls, then into the long passage where golden censers swung gently, spilling thick clouds of perfumed smoke into the air. Still no one, no footsteps, no voices. Only silence. "The soldiers are elsewhere," Peleus said casually as they walked, "and tonight, with their master gone," a faint smile touched his lips, "they sleep, or drown themselves in wine and lotus." Conan grunted. Then something caught his eye. He turned, looked through a wide arched window that opened onto a balcony, and froze. The sky, dark, deep blue, scattered with stars. Midnight. Conan blinked as if not trusting what he saw. When he had been thrown into the pits, it had been morning. Now, night had fallen. "How long?" he muttered. The thought unsettled him more than anything else. Time itself had slipped away down there. He followed Peleus into a vast chamber, gold domes above, silver beneath his feet, walls of deep blue stone, lapis lazuli glimmering faintly in the low light. Doors opened in every direction, their arches carved and intricate. Luxury, opulence, a world apart from the horrors below. Peleus crossed the room and dropped onto a silken couch with a long, satisfied breath. "Ah," he murmured, "silk, gold, comfort." He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. For all his talk of higher things, Tsotha enjoys the pleasures of this world. A faint chuckle. "He pretends otherwise." Peleus opened his eyes again, glancing at Conan. "But I make no such pretense." His voice softened. "I am still human. I enjoy these things." Then suddenly he stiffened slightly. "Wine," he said. His eyes lit faintly. "Yes, wine." He gestured lazily. "My friend, pour me a cup." Then he paused. "Ah, no." A faint smile. "You are a king. I will serve myself." Conan snorted. "To hell with that," he growled. He grabbed a crystal goblet, filled it, and handed it over. Then, without ceremony, he lifted the jug and drank straight from it, deep, long gulps. He lowered it with a satisfied breath. "Good wine," he wiped his mouth. "But we're not here to drink." His hand tightened on the sword. "Are we going to sit here and wait for his men to wake up and cut our throats?" Peleus smiled faintly. "No." He rose slowly, moving towards a table of black ebony. "Would you like to see something?" Conan's eyes flared. "Strabonus," he said darkly. "I'd rather face him blade to blade." Peleus picked up an object from the table. A sphere, smooth, shimmering, a crystal globe that seemed to hold light within it. "Tsotha's toy," Peleus said lightly. "Crude, but useful." He turned, holding it out towards Conan. "Look, see what fate is weaving beyond these walls."
Peleus placed the crystal globe gently on the table. "Look." Conan leaned in. At first, nothing. Just mist. Clouded depths shifting slowly, like smoke trapped inside glass. Then, the haze deepened, expanded, and something began to form. Shapes, lines, a landscape rising out of nothing. Conan's eyes narrowed. He knew this place. Wide plains stretching beneath the night sky, a winding river cutting through the land, hills rising beyond it like a jagged wall. Then, the city, walled, guarded, familiar. "By Crom," Conan breathed. "Shamar." His voice hardened. "They're attacking it." The image sharpened. Armies swarmed the plains outside the walls. Tents and pavilions spread across the narrow ground between the river and the hills. Thousands of warriors moved like a living tide, steel glinting under the pale light of the moon. They surged forward, again and again. Arrows rained down from the towers, stones crashed into their ranks, men fell. But more came. Endless, relentless. Conan's jaw clenched. "Dogs," he muttered. Then the vision shifted. The battlefield dissolved. Another city rose in its place, Towers, domes, familiar in a way that struck deeper than any battlefield. Conan froze. Tamar, his city, his capital. But something was wrong. Chaos filled the streets. Crowds surged through the avenues, shouting, fighting, tearing at anything they could reach. Fires flickered. Looters moved like shadows, breaking doors, dragging spoils into the open. And soldiers, not his. Men in armor bearing a different sigil. Pelia. They stood on the walls, in the towers, in the streets, claiming the city. Conan's hands tightened into fists. Then he saw them, his own knights, the warriors of Poitain, riding out, leaving the gates, and the people, his people, turned on them, shouting, mocking, driving them away. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. And above it all, a face, faint, like a shadow over the city, smiling, triumphant. Prince Arpello. Then the vision faded. Gone. The crystal dimmed. Conan straightened slowly, his face dark, his breath heavy. "So," he growled, "they turn on me the moment I fall?" "Not quite," Pelias said calmly. "They believe you're dead." Conan said nothing. "They panic," Pelias continued. "With no king, no army, enemies closing in," he gestured lightly. "They cling to strength, a ruler, any ruler." Conan's lip curled. "Arpello." "The strongest among them," Pelias said simply, "and the nearest. They fear chaos more than tyranny." Conan's eyes burned. "When I return," he said, voice low and deadly, "he won't rule anything. He'll rot." Pelias didn't argue. "But before you return," he said quietly, "Strabonus marches." That stopped Conan. For a moment, then he began to pace, back and forth, like a caged beast, thinking, calculating, cursing. "I can't reach Shamar in time," he muttered, "even with the fastest horse, half a day at least." He shook his head. "And even if I did, what then?" His voice hardened. "Die with them when the walls fall?" He turned sharply, and Tamar, 5 days' ride. His fists clenched. 5 days? By then, Strabonus will already be at the gates. He laughed harshly, "And I'll have no army waiting for me." His pace quickened. "My nobles will scatter the moment they hear I'm dead, every one of them hiding in their own lands, guarding their own skins." He spat to the side. "And with Trocero gone, there's no one left to stop Arpello." His voice dropped. "Not from taking the crown, not from emptying the treasury." He stopped, turned slowly, eyes blazing. "He'll sell the kingdom, sell it to Strabonus for a throne made of lies. And when Strabonus turns his back, a bitter smile, he'll try to rebel and fail. Give Strabonus all the excuse he needs to take everything." Silence filled the chamber. Conan's chest rose and fell slowly. Then he lifted his head, eyes burning with raw frustration. "If I could just reach Tamar," his voice tightened. "If I could fly." A low, savage whisper escaped him. "If I had wings." Pelias had been tapping his fingers idly on the jade table. Then he stopped, abruptly. Something in his expression changed. A decision. Without a word, he rose and motioned for Conan to follow.
The king obeyed, though his thoughts were still burning with anger and frustration. He followed in silence as Peleus led him out of the chamber, through dim corridors, and up a spiraling flight of marble stairs veined with gold. Higher and higher, until they emerged into the open night, at the very top of the citadel, the highest tower. The wind struck Conan at once, strong and cold, tearing through his hair, whipping his dark mane around his face. Above them, the sky stretched vast and endless, crowded with stars that seemed closer here, almost within reach. Below, Korshemish shimmered in the darkness, its lights flickering like scattered embers, so far beneath them that it felt unreal. For a moment, Conan forgot everything: the war, the betrayal, even his rage. Peleus stood at the edge of the tower, unmoving, different. There was something distant about him now, as if he belonged more to the stars above than to the world below. Then he spoke. "There are beings, not only of earth or sea," he said quietly, his gaze lifted to the sky, "but of the air and beyond. Creatures that dwell where no man has walked." His voice deepened. "To most, they are unknown, unreachable." A pause. "But not to one who knows the words."
The signs, the truths beneath all things. He turned slightly toward Conan. "They are not our enemies, not always." Conan frowned, uneasy. Peleus raised his arms slowly toward the sky. Then he called out. A sound unlike anything Conan had ever heard. Long, strange. It echoed outward, not just across the night, but into something deeper, something vast. The sound didn't fade, it receded, as if traveling endlessly into the void. Silence followed, heavy, expectant. Then a sound, a beating. Wings. Conan stiffened. The air shifted violently. Something massive descended from the darkness above and landed beside them with a thunderous rush of wind. Conan recoiled instinctively, hand tightening on his sword, but he didn't strike. He stared. The creature was enormous. Its wings stretched impossibly wide, 40 feet or more, casting long shadows in the starlight. Its body was lean, powerful, but wrong. Not a bird, not a bat. Something older, something other. Its eyes glowed faintly as they settled on Conan. Calm, knowing, watching. A chill ran through him. "Mount," said Peleus. Conan blinked. "What?" "Ride," Peleus said simply. "By dawn it will carry you to Tamar." Conan stared at the creature, then at Peleus, then back again. "By Crom," he muttered, "if this is a dream." He shook his head slowly. "It's the strangest one I've ever had." Then his expression hardened. "And you?" "I don't leave allies behind." Peleus smiled faintly. "You need not worry about me." A flicker of something dangerous crossed his eyes. "When the sun rises, the people of Korshem will have a new master." A pause. "We will meet again, on the field, near Shamar." Conan studied him for a moment. Then, without another word, he stepped forward, gripped the creature's ridged back, and pulled himself up. It felt real, solid, alive. He wrapped one arm around its arched neck, still half expecting to wake up. Then the creature moved, wings spread wide, and with a thunderous beat, it launched into the sky. The tower dropped away beneath him. The city shrank, lights fading into nothing. The wind roared past him as they climbed higher, higher, until Korshem was nothing but a distant glow far below, and Conan,
king of Aquilonia, flew through the night. Far away, Tamar burned with unrest. The streets churned with chaos. Mobs surged through the city, shouting, raging, armed with whatever they could seize. Rusted blades, broken spears, crude clubs. It was the hour before dawn, the second day since the battle, and everything had unraveled. Word had spread, swiftly, unnaturally. The king was dead. No one knew how the news had traveled so fast, but it had. And with it, panic. The barons had fled, each one racing back to his own lands to guard his own power. The unity Conan had forged cracked, then shattered. Merchants barred their doors, common folk whispered in fear, and beneath it all, an old dread returned. The fear of the past, of feuding lords, endless wars, oppression, a kingdom sliding backwards toward ruin. The city had lost its mind. Tamar no longer breathed like a kingdom, it howled. The people flooded the streets in wild, desperate waves, crying out for one thing above all else, a king. Not out of loyalty, not out of love, but out of fear. They feared their own nobles as much as any foreign enemy. They remembered the old days, the feuds, the sieges, the endless wars between lords who bled the land dry. They wanted protection, even if it came in chains. Count Trocero stood against the storm. Left behind by Conan to govern the city, he rode among the crowds, trying to calm them, to steady the panic. But reason had no place in Tamar now. Voices rose in accusation, old memories twisted into weapons. "Traitor," they shouted. "He's betrayed the king. He means to plunder the city." Fear turned quickly into madness, and madness into violence. The mercenaries broke first. Sensing weakness, sensing opportunity, they began to loot. Doors were smashed in, merchants dragged screaming into the streets, women pulled from their homes. The city teetered on the edge of collapse. Then Trocero struck, like a thunderbolt. He rode down on the looters with steel and fury, cutting them apart without hesitation. The streets ran red as his knights carved through the chaos, driving the mercenaries back, crushing them, restoring a brutal order. Bodies lay scattered in their wake. The survivors fled in terror. Their leaders were seized, chained, dragged away. For a moment, it seemed control had returned. But the people only screamed louder. "He started it," they cried. "He planned it. He wants power." There was no reasoning with them now. Into this madness stepped Prince Arpello, calm, controlled, smiling. He entered the council chambers like a savior. "I will take responsibility," he declared smoothly, "until a new king is chosen." Conan had no heir. The throne stood empty, and outside, the mob roared. Arpello's agents moved among them like shadows, whispering, guiding, planting the seed. Hope, false hope. A king. We need a king. Arpello. The chant grew, swelled, thundered through the streets. Inside the palace, the council hesitated. Then they heard it, the roar of the crowd beyond the windows, demanding, hungry, relentless. They broke and handed him the power. Trocero did not yield so easily. When the order came to surrender his authority, he refused. For a moment, it seemed the city would erupt into open war, but the people surged around him, not to support him, but to tear him down. They hurled stones, garbage, filth. They screamed for his blood. Even his own knights could not hold back the tide. Trocero saw the truth. A battle here would destroy everything. So he made his choice. With a snarl of contempt, he flung the baton of command at Arpello's feet. Then, as his final act, he had the mercenary leaders hanged in the market square. Justice, or vengeance. Then he turned and rode out of the southern gate, 1,500 armored knights at his back. The gates slammed shut behind him, and in that moment Arpello's mask fell. Gone was the gentle savior. In its place, a predator, cold, hungry, ruthless. Now there was no one left to oppose him. The mercenaries were broken, the city defenseless, and Arpello alone commanded the only force that mattered. He rode into the great square, sat tall upon his warhorse, and proclaimed himself king. The crowd cheered. Fools. The Chancellor Publius dared to object. He was thrown into chains, dragged away. The merchants, at first relieved to see order restored, soon learned the truth.
Arpello's first decree, a crushing tax, heavy, brutal. 6 of the wealthiest merchants came to protest. They never left. Their heads fell where they stood. No trial, no warning, just steel. And silence followed, cold, terrified. The merchants bowed, groveled, licked the boots of the man who had just butchered them. The common people did not mourn them, but soon they began to understand. Arpello's soldiers roamed the streets, drunk on power, on violence. They called it keeping order, but it was nothing less than plunder, extortion, murder, rape. The complaints piled up. Voices rose again, this time not in madness, but in fear. And Arpello? He listened. From the palace of Publius, which he had claimed for himself, because the royal palace still stood defiant. The council trapped inside refused to surrender it. So the kingdom now had a king without a throne, and a city on the brink of breaking once more. Arpello wasted no time. Power, once taken, had to be consumed. He seized the pleasure palace first, not the throne, not the crown, but the place where Conan had kept the women who had warmed his nights. They were dragged out, kicking, screaming, weeping, by ironclad soldiers who knew no restraint and cared for none. Silks were torn, jewels scattered across marble floors, and the air filled with cries of terror. Dark-eyed beauties from Poitain, slim black-haired girls from Zamora, Zingara, Hyrcania, fair-haired maidens from Bithynia, all of them reduced in a single night from queens of luxury to trembling captives. The people saw, and they murmured, not out of love for Conan, but because something felt wrong. This was not order. This was not kingship. This was something uglier, something closer to plunder. Night fell over Tamar like a suffocating shroud, and with it, fear spread. Before midnight, whispers began to slither through the streets. Shamar, under siege. The Kothians had followed their victory. They were at the walls. No one knew how the news came so quickly, but it came, and the people believed it. Panic erupted like fire in dry grass. They didn't question, they didn't think, they reacted. A tide of fear surged through the city, shaking it to its foundations. Crowds stormed Arpello's palace, screaming for action. March! Drive them back! Save Shamar! For a moment, he could have played the game, could have spoken carefully, explained that he needed time, needed support, needed the barons to unite behind him. But Arpello was no longer pretending. Power had gone to his head like strong wine. He laughed, in their faces. The sound echoed down from the walls like mockery from a god. That was the moment something broke, not in the palace, but in the people. A young man climbed onto a column in the marketplace, thin, intense, eyes burning with conviction. Othamedes, a student, not a soldier, not a noble, but he spoke, and the city listened.
His voice cut through the chaos, accusing, fierce. He's no king, he's a puppet, a dog on Strabonus's leash. The words struck like blows. He painted a picture, Aquilonia under Kothian rule, its people enslaved, its lands stripped bare, and Arpello, not as king, but as a servant, a satrap, a traitor crowned in gold. The people trembled, then erupted. Fear turned to rage. Arpello reacted instantly. Seize him! His soldiers surged forward, but the people moved faster. They snatched Othomedes from the column and vanished into the streets, shielding him, hiding him, protecting him like something precious. Stones flew, filth followed, dead cats and refuse rained down on the pursuing soldiers. For a moment, it was rebellion, but steel answered. Crossbows snapped, bolts tore through flesh, horsemen charged. The marketplace ran red again. The mob scattered, broken, bleeding, but Othomedes escaped, smuggled out of the city under cover of chaos, carrying one desperate hope, Trocero. He found the Count beyond the walls, camp already breaking, men preparing to march, not towards Tamur, but away, to Poitain, far in the southwest, to safety, to defend what was his. Othomedes pleaded, begged, come back, take the city, save Shamar. But Trocero only shook his head, grim, practical. I don't have the strength, not to storm Tamur, not to face Strabonus, and if I leave Poitain unguarded, his voice hardened, the vultures will strip it to the bone. He looked towards the city, cold, resigned. The king is dead. Every man must protect his own. And with that, he turned away, leaving Tamur to its fate. Inside the city, the storm raged on. The people gathered again, this time beneath the great tower beside the royal palace, a sea of fury, voices raised in curses, in hatred, in desperation. Above them, Arpello stood on the battlements, looking down, smiling, laughing, as if the chaos below amused him. Around him, archers lined the walls, crossbows ready, bolts drawn, waiting. The king and his people, facing each other, not as ruler and subjects, but as enemies. And all it would take was one order.
Arpello stood tall above the chaos, a man made for power and for violence. He was no soft court schemer alone. Beneath the silken layers of his jeweled garments, steel gleamed. His body was built for war, his sword worn not as ornament, but as a tool he had used again and again. His dark face was hard, certain, unshaken. He looked down at the raging mob below him and laughed. "Fools," he thundered, "howl as you will, Conan is dead." His voice rose, full of iron certainty, and Arpello is king. He believed it, even now, even with the city boiling beneath him, because he understood something the mob did not. Aquilonia was broken. The barons would not unite. They would turn on each other like wolves over a carcass, and while they tore themselves apart, Strabonus would come and crush them all. Until then, all Arpello had to do was hold the capital. "Fools," he roared again, "Arpello is king." The words echoed across the towers. Then, something changed. The sky. The dawn had come. A deep crimson light spread across the eastern horizon, spilling over the towers of Tamar like blood. And in that light, something moved. A speck. Tiny. Distant. At first, no one noticed. Then, someone pointed. The speck grew. Faster. Larger. A bird? No. Too big. A bat? Impossible.
The shape swelled as it tore through the sky until it blotted out the rising sun. A creature of nightmare, wings vast as storm clouds, not bird, not beast, something older, something wrong. A scream rose from the crowd, then another, and another. The creature dove straight toward the city, over the walls, over the towers, and as it passed, something leapt from its back. A man, falling, then landing hard on the battlements. The creature vanished into the sky with a thunder of wings, gone as if it had never been. For a heartbeat, silence. Then they saw him, half naked, blood-streaked, hair wild in the wind, a great sword in his hand, and something in his stance, something undeniable, a presence, a force, a legend made flesh. "The king!" a whisper. Then a roar. "It's the king!" The city exploded. "The king! The king has returned!" Arpello froze. For just a moment, his certainty shattered. Then rage took its place. With a shout, he drew his sword and charged, straight at Archeo. Steel flashed, the blade whistled through the air, and Conan met it, with a roar like a beast unleashed. Their weapons clashed, once. Then Conan moved, faster, closer. He dropped his sword and seized Arpello, one hand gripping his throat, the other his body, lifting him as if he weighed nothing, high above his head. Arpello struggled, kicked, choked, but it was nothing, nothing compared to the fury of the man who held him. "Take your plots to hell with you," Conan roared, and he threw him out into empty air. The Prince of Pelia fell, a long, terrible, final fall. The crowd below scattered as his body plummeted. Then, impact, a sickening crash. Armor shattered, bones crushed, blood sprayed across the white marble. And Arpello, king for a day, lay broken like a smashed insect. Silence. Then madness. The archers on the walls faltered, their courage gone. They fled. And from within the palace, the council burst forth, swords drawn, no longer cowering, now hungry for vengeance. They fell upon Arpello's men with savage joy. In the streets, chaos became slaughter. Pelian soldiers ran. The mob hunted them, tore them apart. Steel clashed, pikes surged, helmets vanished beneath the crush of bodies. Screams filled the air, triumph, rage, bloodlust. The city devoured itself. And above it all, on the dizzy heights of the tower, stood Conan, bare, blood-marked, alive. His arms raised high, his voice booming over the madness below, laughing, a vast savage laugh that shook the towers themselves, mocking kings, mocking mobs, mocking fate itself. The king had returned, and with him, war. The afternoon sun burned over Shamar. Its light glittered across the slow, winding waters of the Tibor, calm, indifferent, as if it did not see the death gathering on its banks.
Along the southern walls, the defenders stood, exhausted, bloodied, waiting. They knew most of them would not live to see another dawn. Below them, the enemy filled the world. Tents and pavilions stretched across the plain like a second city. Endless ranks of soldiers moved beneath banners of Koth and Ophir, their armor flashing cold beneath the sun. They had come in overwhelming force, and Shamar had failed to stop them at the river. Outnumbered, overrun, the defenders had watched helplessly as barges were dragged into place, chained together into a floating bridge, and across it, the invasion had poured, wave after wave. Strabonus had made no reckless advance. He would not leave Shamar alive behind him, not while its walls still stood.
So he had settled in and begun to crush it. His light cavalry had already swept past, riding deep into Aquilonia, burning, looting, spreading terror. But here, at Shamar, he brought the full weight of war. The river itself had become a battlefield. Boats floated midstream, anchored against the current, their decks shielded, their archers protected. From their raised platforms, Shemitish bowmen sent a deadly rain of arrows into the river-facing towers. They were masters of the bow, born to it. The Aquilonian defenders could not match them. Some of the boats had been smashed, great stones hurled from the city's engines crashing through wood and bone alike. But enough remained, enough to hold the river in a storm of death. On land, it was worse. Mangonels thundered. Great stones and shattered tree trunks arced through the sky, crashing into the city, smashing roofs, crushing men where they stood. Rams battered the gates without rest, over and over, relentless. Sappers burrowed beneath the earth like blind beasts, tunneling under towers, preparing their collapse. The moat, once a barrier, was gone, drained, filled with rubble, with dirt, with corpses. Men, horses, all thrown together into a grisly bridge. And over it the enemy came, climbing, hammering, pushing siege towers forward, massive wooden beasts covered in raw hides, rolling closer with every moment, packed with soldiers ready to spill onto the walls. Everywhere, steel, noise, death. Inside the city, hope was gone. 1,500 men, that was all, against 40,000. No reinforcements, no message, no sign. Only the enemy shouting the same words again and again. Conan is dead. And with every hour, it seemed more true. The walls were failing. The western side had already collapsed into a jagged ruin where men fought hand to hand atop broken stone and shattered bodies. Elsewhere, the towers leaned, cracking from the mines beneath them. The city was dying, slowly, inevitably. And now, the end was coming. The horn sounded, deep, terrible, elephants calling the final assault. On the plain, the armies shifted, formed. Ranks of steel drew together, preparing for the killing blow. The siege towers lurched forward, closer, closer. The defenders watched in silence. No cheers, no cries, only grim acceptance. Then they saw them, at the heart of the host, the banners of Koth and Ophir side by side, and beneath them their leaders, Amalris, golden armor gleaming like sunlight, his form slender, deadly, poised like a serpent ready to strike. Strabonus, dark, heavy, clad in black armor that seemed to drink the light. And between them, a third figure, one that chilled even the bravest soul. Tall, lean, wrapped in flowing robes, his face sharp, predatory, like a vulture waiting for death. Sothalanti, and at the sight of him, even the strongest men on the walls felt something cold twist in their hearts, because this was no longer just war. This was something darker, something worse, and Shamar was about to fall. The ground didn't shake at first, it shimmered. A slow, metallic tide rolled across the battlefield, endless ranks of spears catching the sun, flashing like a river forged from molten steel. Step by step they advanced, silent first, then louder, then unstoppable. Behind them the knights came, not charging yet, just a measured advance, controlled, confident. Lances angled like a forest of death. Banners snapped in the wind, their colors bleeding into the sky like war itself had been painted across the horizon. Up on the walls, no one spoke. Men tightened their grips on worn blades, edges chipped dark from battles long past. Breath slowed, eyes hardened. Some whispered prayers to Mitra, Others said nothing at all. They were waiting to die. Then a single sound split the world in two. A bugle, sharp, sudden, impossible to ignore. And beneath it, something else. A distant thunder. Hooves. At first it was faint, just a tremor behind the chaos, but it grew, louder, faster, until it swallowed everything. All eyes turned north. Beyond the plain, the hills rose in layered steps, fading into the horizon like ancient giants frozen in place. And from those heights, like a storm breaking loose, they came. Riders, fast, low, relentless. They poured down the slopes like a living avalanche, cloaks snapping, blades drawn. These were the raiders who had burned the countryside, now fleeing like hunted wolves. But they weren't alone. Behind them, steel, endless lines of it. Sunlight exploded across armored ranks as they surged into view, emerging from the narrow passes in perfect formation. Cavalry, heavy, unyielding.
And above them, a banner, a golden lion roaring against the sky. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the towers erupted. A roar tore upward, raw and wild, shaking the air itself. Men who had braced for death now screamed in savage joy, slamming swords against shattered shields. The sound rang like iron thunder. Below, the city came alive. Beggars and nobles alike fell to their knees. Silk brushed against rags. Painted lips trembled beside weathered faces. Tears streamed freely as voices rose in desperate gratitude. Mitra! They cried it again and again, as if the name itself could hold back death. But not everyone was celebrating. Far below, amid the ranks of the invading host, chaos ignited. Orders were shouted, confused, desperate. Lions shifted, struggling to turn, to face this new threat crashing down from the hills. Strabonus barked commands, his voice edged with strain, forcing control where none remained. "We still have the numbers," he snapped, though his eyes betrayed him. Unless they've hidden more in the hills." His words faltered. "These are Poitanians," he muttered, jaw tightening. "Of course. Trocero, reckless fool." But then, a voice cut through the panic. "I see them," Amalrus said, disbelief cracking through every syllable. "Trocero and Prospero." A pause, then quieter. "But who rides between them?" Strabonus followed his gaze and froze. The color drained from his face in an instant. No, that's not possible." Then louder, shrill, breaking. "Ishtar, save us! It's him! It's King Conan!" The name hit like a blade. "No," Thotha's voice lashed out, sharp and wild. "Conan is dead. He's been dead for days, digested in Satha's belly." But even as he spoke, he saw it. The figure descending into the plain, impossible to mistake. A giant clad in black armor chased with gold, a warlord carved from shadow and steel, mounted on a massive black stallion that moved like a storm given flesh. And above him, that banner, alive in the wind, real. A sound tore from Thotha's throat. Not a word, not a scream. Something deeper, something feral. Rage twisted his face into something monstrous. "Sorcery," he howled, tearing at his beard. "This is sorcery." His voice cracked, rising into hysteria. "He could not have escaped, could not have crossed the land in time. This is impossible." His eyes burned with sudden, terrible understanding. "Peleus," he spat the name like poison. "I know it. I feel his hand in this." His breath came ragged, shaking. "I should have killed him when I had the chance." Around him the kings stared, stunned, shaken by the name of a man long believed dead. And that was enough. Fear spread. Not slowly, not quietly. It exploded. Men who had marched with confidence now faltered. Lines wavered. Whispers turned to shouts. Every eye locked onto the rider on the black stallion. They all knew him,
and they all felt it, that creeping ancient dread that some things do not stay dead. Thotha saw it in their faces, and it terrified him more than the enemy itself, because for the first time, his army was no longer his. Now, the scream tore out of him like something unhinged. Hit them hard! Thotha's arms slashed through the air, frantic, almost animalistic. Control was slipping, and he knew it. The ground beneath his certainty had already begun to crack. "We are still stronger," he roared, forcing belief into every word. "Break them, crush them where they stand." His voice climbed, spiraling toward madness. "Tonight, we feast in the ashes of Shamar." Then suddenly, he changed. His voice dropped into something darker, older. His hands rose towards the sky, and even Strabodus recoiled. "O Set," he whispered, then shouted, his voice echoing with fevered devotion, "Grant me victory." His eyes burned with fanatic light. "And I will drown your altar in blood. 500 virgins of Shamar, screaming, writhing, offered to you." Even among allies, silence answered him. Not reverence, fear. But the battlefield didn't wait for gods. Across the plain, the opposing force surged into full view. What had seemed like a single army now unfolded into something more complex, more dangerous. The knights came first, disciplined, silent, deadly. But beside them rode something unexpected, a second wave, unrefined, irregular, fast. Men on small, rugged ponies, their gear mismatched, their formation loose, yet purposeful. They didn't charge, they dismounted, quickly, efficiently, and then they became something else entirely. Archers, pikemen, a wall of men hardened by survival. Bossonian bowmen, broad-shouldered and unshaken, their movements steady as stone. Gunderland pikemen beside them, tall and unyielding, their spears catching the light like a field of frozen lightning. Wind tugged at their tawny hair beneath steel caps, but they did not flinch. This wasn't a polished army. It was something raw, something forged in urgency. Because it had been. Not long ago, this force hadn't even existed. It had been chaos, panic, a kingdom on the brink. But then he returned. Conan the Barbarian, and everything changed. He didn't wait, didn't plan, didn't hesitate. He struck. At Tamar, he smashed through the riotous mob that had nearly torn apart the last defenders. Pelian soldiers, battered and surrounded, suddenly found themselves fighting under a king reborn. He didn't ask for loyalty, he took it. A rider was racing north, summoning Trocero back from wherever honor had dragged him. And Conan, he moved. Fast, relentless, southward like a storm given flesh. Every mile fed his army. Villages emptied their strongest men into his ranks. Castles opened their gates. Nobles pledged steel and blood. Horses were taken, weapons gathered. No time for ceremony, no time for doubt. What he built wasn't perfect. It wasn't even enough. But it was sharp, and it was his. Now it stood on the edge of annihilation. 1,900 armored riders formed the spine of it, Poitanian knights, hardened and proud. Behind them, the remnants of mercenaries and veteran soldiers filled the ranks. 5,000 archers, 4,000 pikemen. Too few, too few. But they advanced anyway, orderly, unbroken. First the archers, then the pikes. The cavalry held in reserve, walking forward like a promise not yet fulfilled. Across from them, a giant awakened. Arbanus wasted no time. His lines shifted with practiced precision, expanding outward like a living machine. The allied army rolled forward, vast and gleaming, an ocean of steel swallowing the horizon. From the walls of the city, the watchers felt it, that creeping dread. The rescuers were outmatched, severely. The enemy advanced in layers. First, the Shemitish archers, lean, deadly, their bows already rising. Behind them, Kothian spearmen, packed tight, shields locked. And behind them, the hammer. Armored knights of Strabanus and Amalrus waiting for the moment to strike.
The plan was clear: crush the infantry, then ride over what remained. The distance closed. 500 yards. 4. 3. Then the sky broke. Arrows erupted into the air in a black storm, hissing like a swarm of serpents. They blotted out the sun, raining death between the advancing lines. Men fell, and still they marched. The Western archers did not break. They had faced worse. For 1,000 years they had fought the savage Picts in endless, merciless war. They knew how to endure, how to close ranks, how to keep moving while death walked beside them. They were outnumbered, badly, and the Shemitish bows struck from farther away. But range wasn't everything. Skill answered. Discipline answered. And when the distance shrank, precision answered. The Busonians raised their bows, drew, released. Their arrows didn't scatter. They chose, and the Shemites paid the price. Ranks collapsed. Men dropped in waves, their light armor no match for the deadly accuracy of their foes. Blue-bearded warriors staggered, fell, vanished beneath the storm. And then they broke. Not all at once, but enough. Bows fell from trembling hands, formation shattered, fear took hold. And suddenly, they were no longer an army. They were men running for their lives. Straight back, into their own lines, into the Kothian spearmen behind them. Order dissolved. Confusion spread. And in that single moment, the tide began to turn. Without their archers, they were already dead. The Kothian infantry didn't realize it at first. They kept advancing, shields raised, spears steady, trying to hold formation as the storm closed in. But the sky belonged to the Busonians now. Arrows tore through the air with ruthless precision. Men dropped, not one by one, but in clusters. Entire sections of the line simply vanished under the impact. Still, they pushed forward. Desperation drove them. They broke into a run, straight into the kill zone. And that's when the ground itself seemed to rise against them. The pikemen met them, Gundolin steel, unforgiving, unbreakable. A forest of spear points slammed forward in perfect unison, cold, brutal, final. The Kothians hit that wall and shattered. These weren't ordinary soldiers. The Gundermen had been raised on war, born within a day's ride of savage lands, hardened by raids and bloodshed. They carried battle in their bones. There was no hesitation in them, no fear, only impact, only violence. And against that, the Kothians had nothing left. Already broken by arrows, already bleeding, they crumbled under the assault. Their formation twisted, buckled, then collapsed entirely. What remained turned and fled, not in order, not with dignity, just survival. From the rear lines, a roar exploded. Stravinus. Fury consumed him. He watched his infantry disintegrate, watched the plan unravel, and something inside him snapped. "Charge!" he bellowed, voice cracking with rage. "All of them, charge!" But Arbanus hesitated. Even now he saw what others did not. "The archers," he warned, pointing towards the Busonian lines reforming with terrifying discipline. "They're resetting, and the Aquilonian cavalry, look at them, they haven't moved." It was true. Behind the archers, the knights waited, still, silent, watching, like predators. Arbanus turned back, urgency cutting through his voice. "We should fall back, draw them out, break their formation first." "No!" Stravinus didn't listen. He couldn't. His eyes burned as they locked onto the enemy line, so small, so defiant, a handful of armored figures against the might of his army. It offended him, enraged him. "They are nothing," he spat. "We crush them now." There was no reasoning with him. Arbanus knew it.
For a brief moment, his face hardened with resignation. Then, quietly, he whispered a prayer to Ishtar and raised the horn. The sound that followed was ancient, deep, commanding. The golden olifant roared across the battlefield, and the world answered. Lances dipped, thousands of them, a forest of death angling forward in perfect unity. Then they moved. Slow at first, then faster, then unstoppable. The earth trembled beneath the charge as the massive cavalry surged forward, gathering speed like an avalanche tearing free from a mountain. From the walls of Shamar, it was a sight beyond belief, a sea of gold and steel crashing towards a fragile line. They hit, and everything broke. The disordered remnants of the infantry, friend and foe alike, were crushed beneath the charge. Horses thundered through them without slowing, hooves smashing bone, trampling bodies into the dirt. Nothing mattered now, only momentum, only impact. The knights drove forward, straight into the storm. Arrows met them, not scattered, not desperate, but precise, relentless. The Bessonians stood firm, feet planted, shoulders locked, drawing, releasing, again, again, again. Their voices rose in short, sharp cries, timed, unified, mechanical in their rhythm, and the charge began to die. At full speed, at full force, it began to collapse. The front ranks vanished, not slowed, erased. Horses screamed and went down, their bodies bristling with arrows. Riders toppled forward, crushed beneath the weight of those behind them. Still, the charge pressed on. It had to. Another 100 paces, and they would reach the archers. Another 100, and it would all be over. But they never made it, because flesh cannot outrun death. The rain of arrows thickened, turned savage, turned unstoppable. Men fell faster than they could advance, lines tangled, momentum faltered. And then it broke. Arbanus fell first. An arrow punched clean through his throat. He didn't even cry out. His body jerked, then dropped beneath his own warhorse, which collapsed a heartbeat later, its skull shattered under its own weight as it crashed to the ground. Command died with him, and chaos took its place. Orders clashed. Strabonus screamed one command, Amalrus shouted another. No one listened, no one could. Fear had already taken hold. Not just fear of death, but something deeper, something older. The memory of a man they had seen, riding down from the hills, a king who should have been dead. And in that moment of confusion, when the great army staggered, when its power fractured, a new sound rose. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. Trumpets. Not theirs. His. Conan the Barbarian. The Bessonian lines split apart like a gate opening, and through them they came, the Aquilonian knights, not charging blindly, not in chaos, but with purpose, with fury, with absolute, unstoppable force. They crashed forward like a hammer of iron, straight into the heart of a broken army.
The collision wasn't a clash. It was a catastrophe. When the two forces met, the impact rippled across the battlefield like the wrath of the earth itself. Even the battered towers of Shamar trembled, as if the city feared it might collapse under the violence unfolding before it. There was no clean line of battle anymore, only chaos. The invaders never had a chance to recover. Their formations, already fractured, already shaken, collapsed under the sheer force of what hit them. A wedge. Solid, unyielding, a living spear of steel. It drove forward with terrifying precision, bristling with lances, cutting straight through the disordered mass like a thunderbolt tearing open the sky. Men didn't fight it, they were broken by it. Lances struck first, long, merciless. They punched through armor, through flesh, through anything that stood in their path. Entire ranks were ripped apart in seconds, leaving nothing but gaps filled with blood and falling bodies. And then came the Knights of Poitan. They didn't stab, they destroyed. Great two-handed swords rose and fell, each swing heavy enough to shatter bone and steel alike. Helmets split, shields burst, men vanished beneath the arc of those blades. The sound was unbearable. Steel crashing against steel, endless, deafening, like 1,000 forges exploding at once. On the walls, the watchers could barely hold themselves upright. Hands gripped stone as the battlefield below twisted into a storm of flashing blades and plunging banners. It wasn't war anymore. It was a maelstrom. Amalrus fell. No ceremony, no last stand. One moment he was shouting orders. The next, Prospero's great sword tore through him. Bones split, armor gave way, and he vanished beneath the hooves of his own men, trampled into the mud as the battle swallowed him whole. Still, the invaders had numbers. More men, more steel. They surged inward, trying to engulf the narrow wedge that carved deeper and deeper into their ranks. Knights of Koth and Ophir closed in from all sides, striking, pushing, hacking, but it didn't matter. They couldn't break it. The formation held, relentless, unstoppable. At the edges of the chaos, the rest of Conan's army arrived. The Bossonian archers, the Gunderland pikemen. They didn't hesitate. They moved in close, too close for distance, too close for caution. Arrows were loosed at point-blank range, punching through armor with brutal force. Men rushed forward with knives, slashing girths, gutting horses, dragging riders down into the dirt. Pikes thrust upward, long, savage strikes that skewered knights from beneath, ripping them from their saddles. The battlefield tightened, closed, turned into slaughter. And at the very tip of the storm, there was one man. Conan, the Barbarian. He didn't fight like the others. He carved. A roar tore from his throat, raw, primal, something older than kingdoms, and his great sword became a blur of flashing arcs. Nothing held against him, not helmets, not chain, not shields. Each strike erased whatever stood before him. He drove forward with sheer force alone, smashing through the press of enemies like a force of nature given flesh. But even a storm can be surrounded. The Knights of Koth closed in behind him, cutting him off from his own men. For a moment, he stood alone, encircled, outnumbered. It didn't matter. Like lightning striking, he broke through. Power, speed, fury. He crashed through their ranks, tearing a path forward until he saw him. Strabonus. The king stood surrounded by his palace guard, his face pale, his composure gone. For a heartbeat, the battle held its breath. This was the moment. Victory still hung in the balance. Strabonus still had numbers, still had a chance. Then he saw who stood before him, and he broke. A scream ripped from his throat as he lashed out wildly, swinging his axe with desperate force. The blade struck. Sparks exploded from Conan's helmet. The impact staggered him, just for an instant, and that was enough. Conan struck back. The great sword fell, not fast, but final. Steel met steel, then crushed through it. Helmet split, bone followed, and Strabonus ceased to exist. His lifeless body slid from the saddle as his warhorse reared in terror, screaming into the chaos. For a moment, everything stopped. Then, the army broke. A cry rose from the ranks, fear, disbelief, collapse. Lines faltered, men stepped back, then turned and ran. Through the chaos, Trocero and his warriors hacked their way forward, carving a path to their king. Beside them, the great banner of Koth fell, and with it, what remained of their will. But the end hadn't come from the field alone. Behind the fleeing army, fire rose. Shamar. The gates had opened. The defenders had struck. They poured out like a final, desperate storm, cutting down the guards, tearing through the camps, setting fire to tents, destroying engines of war. Flames devoured everything. Smoke choked the sky. And that was the breaking point. The army didn't retreat.
It dissolved. What had once been a shining force of conquest turned into a fleeing mass of men, throwing away weapons, trampling one another in blind terror. And behind them came death, relentless, unforgiving. The victors didn't stop, didn't slow. They hunted. They cut down the fleeing remnants without mercy, because this was no longer a battle. It was the end.
They ran, not in formation, not in order. They ran like men already dead. The river was their only hope. A thin line of escape cutting through chaos and smoke. Thousands of them surged toward it, armor clattering, breath ragged, eyes wide with the kind of terror that erases pride, rank, even reason. Behind them, death followed. Out on the water, the flotilla waited. Boats lashed together, forming a fragile bridge to the southern shore. Men poured onto it, shoving, trampling, clawing their way forward. But salvation didn't wait. The crews saw the truth first, saw the army breaking, saw the fire rising behind it, and they chose survival. Ropes were cut. Oars struck the water. The flotilla pulled away, fast, leaving the rest behind. Screams followed them, desperate, betrayed, ignored. Still, some made it. They rushed across the shifting barges, leaping from plank to plank, slipping on blood and water as the bridge groaned beneath the weight. For a moment, it held. Then, it broke. From the northern bank, the men of Shamar struck. Axes fell, ropes snapped. The makeshift bridge tore apart, drifting into the current, splintering, separating, taking with it the last chance of escape. And the river became a grave. Men were driven into it, dragged down by the weight of their own armor, vanishing beneath the surface without a sound. Others died where they stood, cut down along the banks, their bodies piling high in the mud. There was no mercy. There had never been any promise of it, and none was given. By the time the sun dipped low, the battlefield was unrecognizable. From the distant hills to the blood-soaked banks of the Tibor, the land was buried beneath the dead. The river itself ran red, thick, choked with bodies. Victory had come, but it had demanded everything. Of the 1,900 knights who had ridden south with Conan the Barbarian, barely 500 remained. The archers, the pikemen, they had paid in blood beyond counting. But the enemy was gone. The great army of kings erased. And still, the killing went on. Far from the river, beyond the smoke and screams, another story unfolded, a quieter one. More personal, more deadly. Among the fleeing survivors, one had escaped. Tsotha. He rode like something hunted by death itself, urging forward a gaunt, unnatural steed whose stride devoured the ground with eerie speed. Friend or foe, it made no difference. Anyone in his path was crushed beneath hooves or cut aside without hesitation. He reached the southern bank. Safe, or so he thought. Then he looked back and saw him. A lone figure, black against the dying light, closing the distance. The barges were already drifting apart, the river widening between them, but it didn't matter. Conan didn't slow. He drove his stallion forward without hesitation, leaping from one drifting barge to the next, each jump a gamble, each landing a thunderous impact on unstable wood and shifting water. Like stepping across floating shards of ice, except one mistake meant death. Behind him, the river swallowed the broken bridge. Ahead, his prey. Tsotha screamed, a curse, a warning. It didn't matter. The final gap loomed. The black stallion gathered itself, leaped, and landed hard on the southern shore, muscles trembling, breath tearing from its lungs. But it held, and the hunt continued. Across the open meadow they raced, hunter and hunted. Sotha pushed his mount to its limits, but no matter how fast he rode, no matter how desperately he fled, he could not pull away. Behind him, death kept pace. The world grew quiet. The sounds of battle faded into nothing. Only wind remained and the pounding of hooves. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long and strange across the land, turning the world into something unreal, something dreamlike. Then, a shadow moved in the sky. At first, just a speck. Then, wings. A massive eagle descended, cutting through the air with terrifying speed. It struck without warning, straight at Sotha's mount. The beast screamed, reared, lost control, and threw his rider. Sotha hit the ground hard, but he rose quickly. Too quickly. He turned to face what followed. His eyes burned, not with fear, but with something worse, something unhinged, something venomous. In each hand he held something, small, glowing, deadly. Even before he understood it, Conan knew that was death. The king dismounted, slowly, deliberately, armor clanking with each step. His great sword rose into position, heavy, steady, final. He walked forward. No hesitation, no fear. Only purpose. A savage grin crossed across his face. "Again," he said, voice low, dangerous. "We meet, wizard."
"Stay back!" The scream tore out of Sotha like something rabid. "Come one step closer and I'll burn the flesh from your bones." His voice cracked, wild and unhinged, no longer a man speaking, but something cornered, something dangerous. "You cannot defeat me," he shrieked, eyes blazing with madness. "Hack me apart, I'll rise again. Tear me to pieces, and every fragment will hunt you to your grave." His breath came fast, ragged. "I feel it now. Peleus, yes, this is his doing, but I defy you both. I am Sotha, son of—" He never finished. Conan the Barbarian moved. No warning, no hesitation, just motion. Steel flashed. Sotha reacted on instinct. His arms snapped forward, hurling something small, something glowing. But Conan was faster. He dropped low, and the object screamed past his head. Behind him, the world exploded. Fire erupted against the earth in a violent burst of light and heat, scorching the ground black in an instant. The air itself seemed to shriek. But Conan was already rising, already closing the distance. Sotha's second hand came up. Too late. The sword fell, clean, effortless. It cut through flesh and bone as if they were nothing. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then his head left his body. Blood erupted in a violent arc, dark against the dying light as the severed head spun away and struck the ground. The body staggered, twitched, collapsed. It should have ended there. It didn't. The head lay in the dust, but the eyes were alive, burning, mad. They stared up at Conan with the same feral intensity, no fading, no death, no release. The lips trembled, twisted, as if still trying to speak. The hands of the fallen body clawed at the air blindly, searching, reaching, as though trying to find what had been taken. Then a shadow swept across the ground. Wings, massive, silent. The eagle returned. It dropped from the sky in a blur of motion, talons extended, and seized the severed head in a single brutal motion. Blood trailed behind it as it rose again, climbing into the darkening sky. Conan didn't move. He watched, and then he heard it.
Laughter. Not the cry of a bird, not the sound of any living creature. Human, deep, echoing, and unmistakable. The voice of Peleus. The sky swallowed the eagle, the laughter faded, and the world twisted, because what happened next should not have been possible. The body rose, headless. It pushed itself upright with slow, unnatural motion, swaying, trembling. Then it began to move, one step, then another, staggering blindly across the darkening meadow, arms outstretched, reaching toward the sky, toward the vanishing speck that carried its head away. It walked, as if it still knew where it was going, as if death meant nothing. Conan stood frozen, watching, until the shape blurred into the deepening dusk, until it vanished completely into the purple shadows of evening. Silence returned, heavy, unsettling. Then a single word broke it. Crom. His shoulders shifted, tension finally releasing in a slow, weary breath. A curse on all this wizard's madness. His voice was rough now, grounded, human again. Peleus, he's done right by me. A pause, then a low, irritated growl. But I've no desire to cross paths with him again. He lifted his sword slightly, studied its edge, still stained with fresh blood. This, he muttered almost to himself, this I understand. A faint, grim smile touched his lips. A clean blade and an enemy I can see. He exhaled sharply, shook his head. Damn it all. And for the first time since the battle began, he sounded almost tired. What I wouldn't give for a flagon of wine.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.